This guy, he has a legendary skill. His eyes turn dark, and he sees absolutely everything. But before awakening, his life was trash. A week ago, it was a normal day. Then a terrifying announcement on TV. In 2 months, the world would starve. And monsters hungrier than humans came to eat us. God was generous, humans awakened. Still, almost everyone died. I stayed in my room 3 months since the world outside ended. But being alone sucks. I'm the only one alive in this building. The worst part, no internet. I'm Kim Jae-hyun. My boredom ended the moment a monster appeared at my window. It looked like hell with the ugliest mouth ever. I almost died, nearly crapped my pants. But it couldn't enter. No One Punch Man moment here. Why? My ability, my house. My rules, I'm the ultimate shut-in. No one gets in without my permission. This wasn't the first time. Guess I'll never die from a heart attack. Yeah, this power saved me. But it has a downside. I can't leave either. Stuck here since awakening. You think surviving is good. No internet, no girlfriend. No fun to message. The ultimate shut and can't leave. Pisses me off, I can't do anything. Handsome, rich, and still single. Now it's worse, food is running out. The fridge broke, everything will rot. Will I die for being too safe? Then I saw my skill leveled up. I never thought about what leveling up even means. Maybe that monster that hit my window and died gave me XP. Must be now that thing is lunch for other monsters down there. Then they acted weird, the ugly mouth monster turned to smoke. The system said a reward was sent. 2 million cash in my wallet. I had no idea what wallet meant, but the power coming back shocked me. Now electricity and water are back. A miracle I can shower and stop stinking. Internet back, nope. Damn it, why not that too? My place is a mess. I found a flash drive. Didn't remember it, checked at old family photos. Mom, when I was born, so beautiful me at 5Q and smiling at 12. Long hair at 15, happier than ever. I wish my parents were here. I don't even know if they're alive. I decided I'll find them, and I'll bring them here no matter what. Went to the balcony, saw something new. A system window, level 1 shop. I saw that and thought it looked suspicious, so I tried using the shop. It said I had 2,000 and 3,000 cash like a supermarket wall. Then I tried opening the window to go outside. Still trapped, can't leave the building. But I just realized something, I can level up by hunting monsters. Those creatures out there. If I kill them, I get stronger. Maybe if I level up enough, I can leave this place. But seeing those terrifying flying monsters, no way I can beat them actually. That one died on my window. By itself, I can kill the goblins down there. They're way weaker, so I decided to test it. I'll throw this water bottle. Will it leave the building? Yes, items can leave. I can in that case. I got an idea. I'll throw something heavier and kill goblins from here. When I was ready to throw a dumbbell, the goblins started calling each other and ran away. Those bastards, they can't run. Now I need to test this theory. So I threw the dumbbell with all my strength, missed. My aim sucks, I've only got one left. Now with no idea. Just one dumbbell left, then I heard a noise. The damn goblin started screaming. They grouped up and ran toward the building. It was terrifying, all of them moving together in perfect sync when they rushed at the building. I fear the worst, but maybe it's not that bad. If they come closer, it's easier for me to hit them. Then I had an idea. I opened the shop. My points were there. I asked it to list the available items, just like I thought. The dumbbell was analyzed. The system listed it, so I can buy more. And the price exactly the same as online. So it's like a virtual shop. I asked the system for more dumbbells. Bought them, they materialized in front of me. And the price was deducted from my account. This is insane. Maybe the people downstairs heard me scream. I threw the dumbbell with all my strength, and this time I got lucky. Headshot on a goblin system said, I killed it and gained EXP, also 3,003. 45 cash added to my account. The others were terrified, wondering what the hell fell from the sky. Dumbbells don't usually rain from above. I kept throwing more dumbbells, but now they were alert, missed every shot. So I just kept buying more dumbbells and trying again. And with effort, I hit some of them. As a result, I kept leveling up more and more. The feeling is amazing. Then the system notified me the ultimate shut-in. Unlocked storage level 1, an alternate dimension for storing items. Tested, I tried putting a dumbbell inside. It vanished from my hand listed in storage. Worked perfectly, I pulled it back out right in my hand. Incredible, I can store anything and take it out anytime. So now I'll do something cruel. I filled the storage with dozens of dumbbells. When I released them outside the building, a rain of dumbbells fell from the sky. The goblins couldn't escape. They were crushed, all of them dead. I'm amazed by my powers. I never knew they could be used like this. Now I found out I can analyze other items, like food, and buy them with shop money. But now I have a new problem. My money is limited. Also, the power bill keeps draining my money. And since I wiped out the goblins with dumbbells, no monsters have come near my apartment. No monsters means no money. No EXP if nothing comes close. I'm screwed. I need a new way to kill monsters. While I was thinking, something appeared in the sky. And then I remembered that thing from before. The one that attacked me. This is bad. That's a Calican, a high-level monster. I ran to the kitchen, tied shiny spoons to a chair, and hung it outside to reflect light. It worked. The monster noticed and flew toward the building, ready to strike with that disgusting mouth. But this time I wasn't scared. The barrier was still active. It can't break through if it keeps going. It'll kill itself like the last one. More EXP for me. This one's smarter. It realized it couldn't pass. Then it flew away. No way. But actually it didn't leave. It landed on the roof when I leaned out to look. Holy crap, I almost crapped my pants again. It pecked one spot hard, but the barrier is absolute. Nothing enters without the supreme shut-in's permission. I thought for a second, then I pulled up the shop. If dumbbells can kill goblins, what kills a monster this huge? While it kept pecking, I had an idea. I spent cash on oil bottles. Perfect. Poured oil in pots and heated it. If boiling oil can kill anything, let's find out. Then I wrapped paper on sticks and dropped the boil. Oil into storage, lit the stick on fire. Time for the ultimate trick. The beast kept pecking the barrier. I shouted for the oil to drop from the sky. Storage opened above it. Boiling oil poured down. The monster screamed. I threw the burning stick. The oil ignited flames everywhere. It worked, yes. That beast is fried chicken now. It crashed to the ground burning. Smelled awful, looked worse. When it finally died, the system popped up. Calican defeated, EXP gained, and my cash. Now I've got 9,347,000. The supreme shut-in is richer than ever. But then something happened. I unlocked a requirement. My territory expanded. Not just my apartment, the whole building, and a new ability. At first it hurt. My vision glitched. Then I saw the entire building, including the people below. A family sitting in their living room, sad, hungry. What the hell? My eyes feel weird. Who are they? After a few seconds it faded. My eyes went back to normal. But now the system showed their info. A man 30, a woman 32. Daughters 3 and 6, all eligible to become citizens of my territory. The system warned non-citizens will be expelled if I do nothing there. They're out, and the monsters will kill them. So I granted them citizenship. Then I checked the ability. Just as I thought, supreme eyes level 1. I can see everything in my territory. Nothing escapes, and in the system. The population list appeared. Currently 4 citizens out of 600 slots available. 600. No way they fit in my apartment. Not even this building. Then I saw something amazing. Citizens share their power and EXP if they fight and level up. I get a cut. Perfect. I'll get stronger faster, and now missions unlocked. Time limits if I fail. There's punishment. First mission. Kill a goblin in 168 hours. Fail. The punishment says your manhood falls off, which basically means death. Same thing the system asked if I'd accept. I hesitated. I declined for now. Then I tested supreme eyes again. The world went dark. I could see the family below the scene switch to them. The little girl asked her dad what they do. No food. The kids were starving. The dad felt crushed watching his daughters hungry. But outside, is hell. Going out could mean never coming back. Still, he had to try. He told his wife he'd go find food. She knew what it meant if he stayed. They'd die if he left. Maybe they'd all die, but at least there's a chance. He got ready to leave, said goodbye like it might be the last time. The kids cried, begging him not to go. When he was about to open the door, the handle turned by itself. They froze. Monsters. The door opened slowly. Light burst in. The dad grabbed a weapon ready to fight. But it wasn't a monster. He shouted for mercy. Then saw me standing there. I'm here to help, I said. Water and food. They must be starving. They all stood in shock. How could someone show up to help? The father couldn't refuse. It was the only way to save his daughters. He invited me in. After that, the scene changes, and we see chubby Choi Hyung-jun's 2 kids hiding behind their dad. Their suspicious eyes fixed on Jae-hyun. The 2 kids don't trust him at all. Meanwhile, chubby Hyung-jun, his wife, and the 2 children are sitting together at the table. Jae-hyun peels oranges, trying to break the tense atmosphere. He watches them in silence, wondering if he caused too much of shock. However, as he looks around the room, Jae-hyun notices that it's completely empty. There's no food, no water, and no light. The curtains are tightly closed so they don't attract monsters. Jaehyun agrees with himself, recognizing it was a good idea, deciding to help even more. Jaehyun focuses on the room's ceiling light. His eyes begin to glow blue, and with a blink the room light turns on. The chubby guy is shocked. Before he can overthink, Jae-hyun slides a water bottle across the table, asking the chubby guy to give the water to the kids first. The children drink the water, as if they've been in the desert for months. Jae-hyun watches them closely, a slight smile on his face. The younger child, Seo-hyun, almost chokes from how thirsty she is. Noticing this, Jae-hyun quickly offers her an orange. Seo-hyun hesitates, but takes the orange. The sweet citrusy aroma spreads, making her mouth water. She takes the orange to her mother, who carefully feeds it to her. The moment Seo-hyun eats, her eyes sparkle with delight. The orange is so sweet and juicy it melts in her mouth. Her joy is obvious, seeing his sister enjoy the orange. Nayeon also asks their mom for a piece. Hyun's wife obliges, and the children's laughter begins to fill the room. As Jae-hyun observes the joy, the system notification appears. The family's trust in Jae-hyun has increased a lot. Seo-hyun's trust level has reached 57, which qualifies her to become a vessel. Jae-hyun is shocked to see this notification. He still doesn't fully understand what a vessel is, but he's sure of one thing. He doesn't want to make a 3-year-old child his vessel. He thinks about how he can increase the chubby guy's trust to 50, since his current trust level is only 31. Jae-hyun is lost in thought when the chubby guy suddenly calls out to him, thanking him from the bottom of his heart. He asks how he could repay Jae-hyun's kindness. Jae-hyun calmly replies, suggesting they go outside to talk more. The scene changes, and we now see the chubby guy and Jae-hyun standing in the hallway. Jae-hyun asks the chubby guy if he received a system notification about citizenship. The chubby guy agrees. Jae-hyun asks more deeply if the chubby guy noticed anything strange. He explains that for a brief moment, everyone froze in place upon hearing this. Jae-hyun realizes something crucial. If he hadn't granted citizenship to the chubby guy and his family in time, they would have been teleported out of the building. This realization makes Jae-hyun's expression serious and focused, with a clear and confident tone. Jae-hyun tells the chubby guy that if he helps him, Jae-hyun will provide food, water, shelter, and most importantly, protection. Their safety will be guaranteed. The chubby guy is shocked and asks how that would be possible. Jae-hyun doesn't explain. Instead, he states firmly that if the chubby guy wants food and safety, he needs to trust Jae-hyun. Without question, Jae-hyun promises he will never ask him to do anything that puts his life at risk. The chubby guy closes his eyes, trusting his gut despite everything. The chubby guy feels that Jae-hyun isn't a bad person. He asks what Jae-hyun wants in return, since nothing in this world is free. Jae-hyun calmly responds that he doesn't want anything material, just for the chubby guy to do one small thing for him. The chubby guy feels relieved and even calls Jae-hyun brother. Jae-hyun smiles, slightly acknowledging the words. Changing the subject, Jae-hyun asks the price of the golf club the chubby guy had. He realizes it would be too expensive to put in his store. Changing the subject, Jae-hyun tells the chubby guy they can talk about the club later. And Jae-hyun asks when the apocalypse began. The chubby guy remembers. It was on a weekend when a horde of goblins attacked. Jae-hyun puts the pieces together. Remembering that day, he was chilling in his room like a true supreme recluse. Deduces that those who stayed home were spared from the first wave of destruction. Jae-hyun reflects on the goblins and concludes that his citizenship will be crucial for survival. Finally, Jae-hyun gives the chubby guy a clear command. Find survivors and bring them to this building. After that, the scene changes, and we see Jae-hyun lying comfortably on the sofa. His gaze is fixed on the system notification, watching as the chubby guy's trust is slowly but surely increasing. The chubby guy's trust level has reached 40, but Jae-hyun is anxious for him to reach 50 soon. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun is lost in deep thought, wondering when he'll be able to get out of the barrier. To find his family, he wonders if granting citizenship to others will allow him to reunite with them. A very loud voice suddenly startles him. The sound pierces the silence, and Jaehan instantly recognizes it as the moan of a zombie and a human. Jaehan runs to the window and peeks outside. His eyes widen when he sees a group of 6 to 7 people fighting a goblin horde. He concludes that these people won't survive, as the group is too far from his building for him to help with his summoning ability. Jaehan starts to panic, however. To his surprise, a teenager throws a baseball with incredible force and instantly kills a goblin. Another teenager, wearing a purple tracksuit, launches 2 arrows at once and kills 2 more goblins. Finally, a third teenager with a baseball bat smashes a goblin's head with ease. The remaining goblins run for their lives. Suddenly, a loud noise startles the girl in the purple tracksuit. She finds a pack of ramen noodles on the ground and wonders where it came from. Looking up, she sees a black shadow on top of the building. It's Jae-hyun trying to get her to come inside. As Jae-hyun watches the group, he suddenly hears a knock on his door. It's the chubby guy. Jae-hyun tells him to come in, but the system blocks him. A notification appears, stating that the chubby guy is not allowed to enter. This revelation surprises Jae-hyun. It confirms that no one can enter his room. Even if he allows it, Jae-hyun wonders, will a vessel be able to enter? But he puts thought aside for now. Jae-hyun leaves the room and instructs the chubby guy to get all the cheap items in his house that can serve as weapons. After checking, Jae-hyun immediately opens the Supreme Recluse's shop and summons 5 packs of ramen noodles and 5 water bottles. In seconds, the items materialize in front of the chubby guy, who is shocked for the first time he witnesses Jae-hyun's powers. Jae-hyun calmly gathers the items into a box and hands it to the chubby guy, telling him to deliver the box outside the building. As his next mission, the chubby guy's expression turns worried. He reminds Jae-hyun of the many goblins lurking outside. Jae-hyun reassures him, stating that he already killed all the goblins that were nearby. The chubby guy hesitates, but ultimately believes Jae-hyun's words. Jae-hyun adds that food is valuable in the world outside. He explains his grand plan to give food to the hunters, so they see him as their king and follow him without question. He smiles knowing he is following Lilith's slavery technique. According to this method, those who receive food and water will inevitably become his slaves. The chubby guy trusts Jae-hyun completely and agrees. Jae-hyun then creates a new mission for the chubby guy in the system, which he accepts excitedly at the idea of earning XP. He goes down the stairs carrying the box. Although nervous, he trusts Jae-hyun and holds a golf club tightly. Finally, the chubby guy goes outside the building. Fear hits him instantly with a single thought: drop the box quickly and run. As the chubby guy bends down to place the box, he hears approaching footsteps. He freezes, his body trembling. From the corner of his eye, he sees a black shadow. Panic consumes him, and he imagines a bloodthirsty goblin. He tries to go back into the building, but he slips and the box falls. Paralyzed with fear, he lies there, his face red and his breathing ragged. The footsteps get louder. The chubby guy begs for mercy, pleading with the imaginary goblins. Mustering the courage to open his eyes, the chubby guy is shocked to find there are no goblins. Instead, standing before him are a group of teenagers and students, all looking at him in surprise. After that, the scene changes, and the system notifies Jae-hyun that the people he saw before outside the building are now trying to enter. Jae-hyun understands instantly and activates his Supreme Recluse's omniscient eyes. Through his vision, he observes the teenagers in front of the building door. A girl in a purple tracksuit comments that this is the same apartment from where a strange guy threw ramen noodles. One of the guys holding a baseball bat comments that if someone is throwing ramen noodles around like that, they must have a lot of food. Jae-hyun deactivates his omniscient eyes and tries to add them as citizens. However, the system interrupts him with a notification, warning that he can propose citizenship, but the teenagers can reject it. The thought bothers him as it might mess up his plans. He knows he needs to come up with a plan to ensure the teenagers accept. At the same time, Jae-hyun receives a call from the chubby guy through the camera system. Jae-hyun has a brilliant idea, instructs the chubby guy to wait, and updates his mission. Serve food to the 6 guests. The chubby guy accepts the mission. Immediately, he approaches the guests standing outside the barrier and informs them that if they accept Jae-hyun's proposal, they will receive everything for free upon hearing the offer. They quickly agree. Jae-hyun opens the barrier, allowing them to enter once inside. The system notifies Jae-hyun that his citizen count has increased by 10%. But the XP and money earned by Jaehan citizens will also increase by 10%. This bonus is important. Jaehan observes the teenagers and analyzes their profiles. The highest level one is Ha Dongan, the same one who threw the baseball. His skill baseball throw rank D allows him to throw objects with 10 times the force. Jaehyun realizes the skill is incredibly dangerous and concludes that they are all metahumans. He sets their XP distribution rate to 70%, which means the teenagers get 70% and Jaehyun gets 30% satisfied. He realizes that if he continues to recruit citizens, they will become his automatic hunting team, allowing him to grow stronger and richer passively. This realization makes Jaehyun feel like he's in an age of empires. Jaehyun knows his next step is to build the trust of these new citizens. Surprisingly, their trust is already increasing. Jaehyun is confused but decides to watch more. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the chubby guy, who has brought all the teenagers to his apartment. Hyungjun's wife, seeing the group, is confused But here's the chubby guy apologize and explain that they need food. The wife agrees to help. Jae-hyun watches all this unfold through his supreme recluse's omniscient eyes, satisfied with the progress. After a while, Dong-jin asks the chubby guy what kind of person Jae-hyun is. Chubby guy explains that he doesn't know much, just that he's a strange but kind neighbor. Thanks to Jae-hyun, they now have electricity, water, and food. Upon hearing this, Dong-hyun becomes worried. His gaze moves to the pack of ramen noodles Jae-hyun gave them. Dong-jun thinks Jae-hyun must be a very dangerous and powerful metahuman. He silently decides to impress Jae-hyun no matter what. Dong-jun's trust in Jae-hyun increases a lot, as he believes it's better not to anger someone with so much power. Meanwhile, the chubby guy asks the two girls in Dong-jun's group if they want to take a bath while the food is being prepared. The moment the chubby guy mentions bath, the girls' eyes light up. The simple idea of a bath excites them. Dong-jun is also surprised and realizes the shower must be working. The chubby guy confirms that there's even hot water, and that it's part of Jae-hyun's abilities at this moment. Jae-hyun is like an electrician, a plumber, and a water supplier. One of the girls jokes that Jae-hyun seems to be the god of all their professions. While the group discusses this, a bespectacled teenager approaches Dong-hyun and asks if he thinks he's more powerful than Jae-hyun. Dong-hyun admits that based on Jae-hyun's abilities, this is impossible. Suddenly, Deok-soo grabs Dong-hyun by the shoulder and suggests they should beat Jae-hyun up together. His bizarre reason is that if they overpower Jae-hyun, he will hand over all his food to them. Upon hearing this, Dang-hyun gets visibly annoyed, calls Deok-soo a lunatic, and tells him not to do anything stupid. The group ultimately agrees that the best course of action is to impress Jae-hyun. The scene changes, and this guy from their group is named Byung-ho. A timid boy, Dang-hyun, approaches him and apologizes. He hadn't invited him to the party. Hours before the apocalypse, Byung-ho could have saved his family. The boy replies that it wasn't Dongin's fault, but Dongin promises that after they eat, they will plan to rescue Byung-ho's grandma. However, Young-ho remains distressed. He thinks it's too late, and that the goblins might have already eaten her. The atmosphere gets heavy as they sense someone approach. Maybe it was a monster, and it really was a monster. But the monster's name is Jae-hyun. He enters carrying 2 black bags. At that moment, Dongin realizes that Jae-hyun is the only one who can solve all their problems. Jae-hyun enters with a deadly serious face and looks at the group. Without hesitation, Jae-hyun confidently states that he will help them. Soon after, everyone was seated, but the atmosphere was incredibly tense. Kyung-jun's wife apologizes to everyone for their house being so small. Dong Jaeun tried to comfort her, saying it was their fault for showing up unannounced. At that moment, the chubby guy arrived with the hot food and began to serve everyone. The group of young people was surprised to see the dishes. It was the first time in a long time that they had seen food. And on top of that clean, hot food, Yoon-jin's wife became increasingly nervous, worried if the guests would like the meal. Rice, fried egg, kimchi, and warm water. The dish was mouth-watering. The table was full of various dishes. One of the girls took a small piece of egg to taste. As soon as she bit into it, she was shocked. Her mouth watered, and she exclaimed how delicious the food was. She loved it. Upon hearing this, Hyung-jun's wife felt relieved and smiled. She said the credit for the food belonged to Jae-hyun's ingredients, without which the food wouldn't have been so good, since she didn't even have food for herself. Everyone went silent, wondering who the hell is this Jae-hyun guy. At that instant, a system notification appeared for Jae-hyun, informing him that the trust level of Hyung-jun's wife had reached 50. The man's family and their guests finally began to enjoy the feast. Their expressions brightened with glee, as if they had not tasted such incredible food in ages. They were truly savoring every single bite. One of the young women remarked that the egg rolls were divine, worthy of being served in a 5-star restaurant. And in this broken world, a meal like this was essentially a taste of heaven itself. Another girl, filled with curiosity, inquired of the host's wife if these are the same kind served in Japanese eateries. Observing everyone's happiness, Hyung-jun's wife felt her own heart fill with joy and bid them all to enjoy themselves. Just then, her younger daughter came to her with a crestfallen look, saying she also craved some of those delicious egg rolls. The mother gently touched her small forehead and vowed to make her more after their guests had departed. However, the small child was still clearly not content, and her eyes began to well up with tears. A young woman then beckoned to the small girl and asked if she wanted to share her portion. Hearing this offer, the little girl's face immediately beamed with excitement, and she darted over to sit beside her. The girl, overcome with emotion at the child's adorable joy, used her chopsticks to offer her a piece of egg roll. After tasting it, Seo-Yun was absolutely elated. As the group savored their meal, Jae-hyun saw that the man and his wife were standing nearby, observing everyone with truly contented smiles. Witnessing this scene, Jae-hyun gestured for them to join the table and eat as well. The man and his wife were taken aback at first, but they ultimately sat down and became part of the group, relishing the communal meal. As everyone continued their feast, Jae-hyun felt a sudden pang of melancholy. Seeing everyone share this warm meal made him realize how long it had been since he felt that warmth. He thought about his own parents and prayed they were okay. And with that, the dinner came to a close. Afterward, Seo-Yun went to her mother, saying she was getting very tired. The mother scooped her up and carried her off to bed. The older daughter then followed, right behind them, ready for sleep. Now it was time for a serious discussion. Jae-hyun stated they should resume their important talk. He directed his gaze to Dongjin and questioned why he couldn't reach his grandmother's home, despite it being located so close. Dongjin appeared quite anxious and revealed the reason was because of the goblins. At the mere mention of goblins, Jae-hyun's entire expression became grim. Then Dongjin proceeded to explain further, stating that the building's subterranean parking garage was a perfect lair, so the goblins had made it their primary nest. He even went on to share that he guesstimated the number of goblins there to be at least a few thousand. If they failed to vanquish those goblins, they would never be able to get to his grandmother. Hearing this, Jae-hyun grew agitated and thought to himself, the Supreme Shatin's domain only extends to the 30th floor. That must be how the goblins could infest the apartment building through the subterranean parking structure, which was outside the range of my barrier. That was why I hadn't seen any of the goblins. It was because they were all lurking in the basement. Dongjin went on with his explanation, stating that all the building's exits were linked directly to the underground parking garage, and for that reason, they never dared to venture out. The atmosphere in the room grew even more fraught. Jae-hyun, after a moment of deep thought, then proposed that from what he could recall, there were auxiliary routes and small, hidden passages that acted as a shortcut to the parking garage. Dongjin concurred and revealed their original strategy was to utilize these secondary paths to make their escape. Unfortunately, a creature even more monstrous than the goblins had halted them. Upon learning of a beast more dangerous than the goblin swarm, Jae-hyun felt a sudden chill of both fear and astonishment. Dongjin, his face now filled with sadness, recalled the terrifying monster and described to Jae-hyun that it resembled a wolf or a bear. In fact, he stated that it was as massive as a bear and as ferocious as a bloodthirsty dire wolf. Dongjin then had a flashback of the beast battling a huge goblin group. He added that the sole reason that they had managed to flee that time was because the beast was preoccupied with killing and devouring the goblins, even consuming them whole. At this revelation, Jae-hyun became intensely concerned. Dongjin added they could not be certain what that creature was. It was like a shadow beast because the area was so poorly lit. Jae-hyun remarked that ultimately they couldn't hide from this forever. Dongjin, still filled with fear, stated that they had their own limits. He clarified that without these restrictions, they would have already battled against the goblins. Intrigued, Jae-hyun then inquired about these so-called limits. Rin, who was seated nearby, answered that their weapons were nearly depleted. They were relying on bows and thrown baseballs. Eventually, they would run out of ammunition to shoot or hurl. For Jae-hyun, however, this was a simple fix. Jae-hyun assured them all, saying he could easily solve this issue for them. Then Jae-hyun requested to examine the bows and the baseballs. They presented him with their equipment. Jae-hyun took a look at them and instantly registered the baseball into his system's inventory. When he attempted to add the bow, a prompt appeared from the system, stating he must pay 153,000 to register the high-grade compound bow. Without a moment's pause, Jae-hyun paid the required sum and added the bow to his system. An endless supply of both arrows and baseballs was added to his shop. Jae-hyun then questioned if everyone there knew how to use a bow. The entire group fell silent. Before they could respond, Jae-hyun, with a very serious look, swiftly purchased 5 full bow and arrow sets from his system. Within seconds, the new weapons materialized on the table. Jae-hyun, in his usual calm tone, told the group that even if they lacked the skill to use them, they should seize this opportunity to train. He then distributed the new bows and urged them all to begin their practice sessions immediately. At that very instant, Jaehyun got another system notification that several of their trust levels had increased somewhat. Upon seeing this, he felt a mixture of both surprise and elation. At the same time, a feeling of renewed hope began to spread through the group. They started to believe that with Jaehyun's assistance, they might actually have a real chance to rescue Byung-go's grandmother. Their faith in Jaehyun continued to climb ever higher. Dongjun was absolutely ecstatic, knowing that with these new armaments, his hunting prowess would improve significantly. Another member of the group remarked that with this, they wouldn't need to risk their lives retrieving spent arrows. The entire group seemed more optimistic and energized. Suddenly, Jaehyun grew serious and addressed all of them. Before proceeding, they had to thin out the number of goblins. Dongjun also adopted a very stern expression and inquired when they would commence their hunt. Jaehyun answered that they would begin their assault tomorrow. He made them a solemn promise that they would absolutely succeed in saving Byung-go's grandmother. The very next day, Jaehyun worked to motivate the party. At the sound of Jaehyun's vow, Byung-go's entire face lit up with overwhelming happiness. Jong-yoon then questioned how they would accomplish this feat. With a self-assured smirk, Jaehyun revealed that they would employ a clever baiting strategy. Then, Jaehyun started to outline his complex strategy, but after they had heard it, their expressions betrayed a deep sense of tension. They wondered if Jaehyun's baiting plan would lead to success or failure. Despite their apprehension, they clung to the hope that it would succeed. Abruptly, a system interface materialized in front of Jaehyun, announcing that the large man had just completed his mission and received a payment of 30,000 won. Jaehyun was momentarily surprised by this particular notification, as the quest payment was debited directly from his account. Jaehyun knew that as long as he possessed the funds, he could advance the level of his citizens. From this point on, unless it was a dire necessity, he wouldn't spend any money for now. Before he could contemplate further, another system window flashed into existence, declaring that Byung-go's trust rating had just increased. His trust had now cleared 50, and loyalty had been unlocked, meeting all prerequisites for him to be registered as a vassal. Jaehyun was taken aback by this sudden development. At this moment, a bizarre phenomenon started to envelop Byung-go's body. Bewildered, Byung-go had no idea what was happening, or why he was experiencing this very strange sensation. A new system interface then appeared, proclaiming that the vassal registration was a success. As a bonus, Jaehyun had now acquired the ability Summon Vassal. This power allows Jaehyun to call his vassal directly into his home, but only 2 hours after their initial summoning. From now on, Byung-go was officially Jaehyun's very first vassal, earning the unique title of First Servant. Jaehyun also gained physical strength comparable to a gorilla's, and the very same ability was bestowed upon the larger man. Another system alert promptly materialized, detailing that any EXP and currency earned by the man during hunts would now be multiplied by 2. Additionally, Jaehyun could utilize the Supreme Shutin's Omniscient Eyes ability to summon his vassal 5 meters from his home. All of this new information was completely overwhelming. At this particular instant, Jaehyun spotted a plus icon on the system window and pressed. A prompt appeared, asking if he wished to spend 1,000 won to raise his vassal's current level. The exorbitant cost left Jaehyun completely stunned. He sat down, clutching his head in utter frustration and thinking, is this some kind of ridiculous gacha game? Upon observing him in this state, the man's wife asked Jaehyun if something was the matter, but Jaehyun simply shook his head and assured her it was nothing. From this point forward, Jaehyun resolved that they would call the man by his actual name. Then, Jaehyun asked Byung-go how he was currently feeling. Byung-go answered with great excitement, saying he felt an overflowing power. He could probably even punch a hole right through the wall. He paused a moment before asking Jaehyun if he did something to his body. Jaehyun simply nodded and confirmed that he had. Byung-go went on, saying he felt as if he had become 10 years younger, and a peculiar aura was now coursing through his entire body. Hearing this, Jaehyun was very pleased and offered a smile, handing a new bow to Byung-go. He said he wanted him to join the mission. Although Byung-go took the offered bow, it was obvious that he was incredibly nervous. His hands were visibly shaking as he held it. Jaehyun, on the other hand, thought to himself, citizens get a 10% additional EXP boost, while my vassals get double the total XP. This means that from now on, the man would become even more of a powerhouse. His growth rate would be off the charts. Speaking aloud, He told Byung-go that he must eliminate as many monsters as possible, although Byung-go was still completely terrified and looked to be on the verge of tears from fear. He accepted the difficult task. Jaehyun was quite happy with Byung-go's choice. Smiling, he assured the man that he would be relying on him. The grand mission finally commences as the party cautiously explores the first floor of the apartment building. While they moved with extreme care, Deoksu commented to Dongjin that sweeping the first floor might be a pointless endeavor, since the windows were shattered and the area was in ruin. He suggests there are likely no survivors left. However, Dongjun strongly disagreed and insisted they must check regardless. He reminded the party of Jaehyun's direct orders, stating they were there acting as a rescue squad and had to save every single person they could find. He clarified that their primary mission, given to them by Jaehyun, was to rescue any remaining survivors in the building and guide them to the safety of the 30th floor. Pausing for a moment, Dongjun addressed the whole party, explaining the true core of their mission. They must lure a massive number of goblins into the building and then completely annihilate them. For this strategy to work, they needed to gather as many survivors as they could find. He asked if every single person understood this mission clearly. The entire team agreed with firm confidence, which helped to bolster Dongin's own morale. Meanwhile, Deoksu readied his heavy iron club, prepared to smash some monster heads. Dongin commanded his team to begin their search with room 101, and he ordered everyone to remain on high alert, warning that goblins could materialize at any given moment. The group breached units 101 and 102, where a truly foul stench assaulted their senses. Inside, crimson stains were spattered everywhere. It appeared someone was dragged along the floor before being slain. They discovered a truly gruesome scene. Bodies were strewn about the rooms, shattered windows, and blood smeared across all the walls. Some corpses were bisected, and the women were unclothed, likely brutalized by the goblins before their lives were extinguished. This horrific sight was too much for the women in the party, and they retched right on the spot. The horrified group looked over at Dongjin, who, although clearly shaken himself, urged them all to keep moving forward. The team finished their sweep of the entire first floor, but discovered no survivors, which left them feeling demoralized. Dongjin then guided them up to the second floor. However, the second floor was in no better state. Just as with the first floor, it was filled with corpses, bloodstains, and complete chaos, further unnerving the entire team. Resolved to press on, they decided to check out the third floor. Upon reaching it, Dongjin knocked loudly on a door, shouting to ask if there was anyone alive inside. The team, brimming with a sliver of hope, began knocking on every single door one by one, but they located no living survivors. Dongjin's own morale started to collapse with each passing second, but he resolved to keep going and check the fourth floor of the building. The party made their way up to the fourth floor. Dongjin knocked firmly on another door, asking once more if anyone was still inside. He was on the verge of giving up, praying desperately to find even just a single survivor. This time, to their absolute shock, a voice answered. The man opened the door with great caution and asked if they were truly a legitimate rescue team. Upon spotting a living human being, Dongjun was absolutely ecstatic. He confirmed to the man that they were there to rescue survivors. The man, looking drained but still wary, requested some water. The group gave him a bottle, and the man was stunned. He had assumed they were just intruders who had arrived to harm him or plunder his supplies. Despite his lingering doubts, Dongjin tried to calm his fears, saying they were genuinely there to provide assistance. Dongjin clarified that they were residents of the very same building and were there on a mission to rescue survivors. He then invited the man to come with them. The man, although still a bit skeptical, opened his door slowly, revealing two other people inside his apartment, apologizing for his paranoid behavior before. He introduced himself as Hong Jong-soo and agreed to accompany them. Dongjin became very excited, shaking Jong-soo's hand and introducing himself. In turn, he then ordered two of his teammates to escort Jong-soo to the 30th floor, and then return to continue their ongoing mission. Upon hearing the mention of the 30th floor, Jong-soo became visibly agitated and shouted that they were not going to leave the apartment. At that moment, Jong-soo's youngest son interjected, telling his father that someone would surely come to save them. The boy, looking remarkably composed, theorized that they probably had a helicopter on the 30th floor, clearly a result of watching far too many zombie apocalypse films. Rin then clarified that it was not exactly like that, but if they came with them, they would get hot food and a bath. Upon hearing her mention of a warm bath, Jong-soo's daughter became visibly excited. She began to persuade her father, saying they should go with the rescue team and not worry so much. Despite his own initial reservations, Jiangsu finally consented to join up with them. One after another, more survivors started to follow the party, joining in on the rescue operation. As they proceeded, Jaehyun got another system notification. It declared that his citizen population had now reached 40, and the EXP and gold they earned had increased by 90%. The scene shifts, and now we see Jaehyun choosing to temporarily house all the children, and the elderly inside the larger man's apartment, while all the others remained in the hallways. Dong-hyun then approached Jaehyun and told him they had only succeeded in rescuing 40 people. Up to this point, Jaehyun asked Dong-hyun if there were truly only that many people in the entire building. Dong-hyun answered with a somber tone, explaining that everyone who had exited their rooms was savagely killed. He added that they had searched all the way up to the 29th floor, but it appeared most people didn't even leave their apartments. Jaehyun was pleased with all their hard work, although he noted that the man's apartment was already nearly at capacity. Even so, he decided that this number would be sufficient for now. Activating his supreme Shatin's omniscient eyes, Jaehyun observed what everyone was currently doing. He first saw Byung-go effortlessly lifting a chair. He then saw the man and others holding a massive water jug, collaborating with all of the women. Finally, he saw Dong-hyun diligently working at his assigned tasks. They were nearly finished with all the necessary preparations Jaehyun had previously ordered them to complete. With a sly grin, Jaehyun told Dong-hyun that they were now prepared to advance to Phase 2 of the Goblin Hunt. Dong-hyun assembled everyone and detailed their next mission, to bait the goblins concealed in the subterranean levels. He clarified that they would begin with basement level 1. The party would divide into 2 squads to draw out the goblins on B1, and then exterminate them afterward. They would then move on to purge the goblins on B2. The spectacled boy asked with a nervous voice, "What if there are far more goblins than we anticipated? Won't we become trapped and cut off on the first floor? And what if a problem arises while we're moving all the slain goblin bodies?" Before Dong-hyun could even give an answer, Rin, clutching her compound bow, confidently stated that she would slay all the nearby goblins, guaranteeing this would not happen. She then looked to reassure the anxious boy, reminding him that as his older sister figure, she would make sure that everyone remained safe. Dong-hyun also gave the group his reassurance, adding that, unlike their situation before, they now possessed an ample supply of arrows, so they would surely be all right. His unwavering confidence persuaded the worried member to agree to the plan. Suddenly, a noise grabbed all of their attention. Everyone became instantly alert, spinning around with grim expressions, to see 3 goblins standing right in front of them. Without losing a single second, Rin immediately fired her bow, striking 2 of the goblins cleanly with her arrows. Dong-hyun swiftly smashed the final goblin's skull, like a ripe watermelon, with his heavy club. In a flash, all 3 of the goblins were dead. Following the quick battle, the spectacled boy playfully asked Dong-hyun why he even carried a bow, if his only intention was to use a club. Hadn't he insisted he needed the bow? Deoksu answered that using a club simply felt more instinctual, although he did mention that he felt somewhat stronger than before. Little did he realize it was due to Jaehyun's magically enhanced club. Before Deoksu could say anything else, a woman drew their attention back to the goblin corpses. Amazingly, the dead goblins' bodies began to dematerialize. Jaehyun was now collecting his spoils of war. Byung-go, upon witnessing this phenomenon, was completely astonished and wondered in shock if this was yet another one of Jaehyun's abilities. Ignoring this strange distraction, Dong-jin ordered the party to proceed toward B1. They obeyed his command. All the while, Byung-go's trust in Jaehyun grew ever stronger and deeper. He started to believe that Jaehyun could truly save his grandmother. Meanwhile, a system alert materialized in front of Jaehyun, stating that the group's overall trust in him had increased while drinking water. Jaehyun read the new notifications and thought to himself that, although he had never planned for it, it seemed he had taken care of them all like a true guardian. Jaehyun now felt like a dependable older brother. At that very moment, another system alert suddenly appeared, revealing that Byung-go had now reached a trust level of 50, satisfying all of the necessary requirements to become a vassal. Jaehyun was quite surprised, as he had not anticipated Byung-go's trust in him to grow so rapidly. Jaehyun then reflected that Byung-go must have a deep belief that Jaehyun could save his grandmother. Acknowledging this significant development, Jaehyun understood that the more vassals he managed to acquire, the more accelerated their growth would be. He checked Byung-go's loyalty stat and was shocked to find it was at 88, an even higher level of loyalty than between a mother and son. Calming himself, Jaehyun decided that this was excellent news and officially confirmed that Byung-go would become his vassal. Internally, He vowed to do everything within his power to save Byung-go's grandmother. The moment that Jae-hyun confirmed, Byung-go's body started to glow during the ongoing goblin fight. Confused, Byung-go had no clue what was happening to him. The brilliant light startled the entire group, including the goblins, who all began to fall back. Dongjun, feeling nervous, told everyone that he didn't understand what was going on, and then commanded them all to retreat. The goblins, now temporarily blinded, could not see. However, seeing their chance, the group began their strategic withdrawal. Dongjin and Rin fired arrows at the blinded goblins. As they fled, their arrows found their marks, striking goblins in the forehead, killing them instantly. With a focused expression, Rin unleashed her ability to fire multiple arrows at once, felling many goblins. However, the sheer number of goblins overwhelmed them as more continued to appear. Upon seeing the massive goblin wave approaching, Byung-go panicked and exclaimed that it looked like even the goblins from B2 had come up to B1. This was entirely unexpected. It seems the goblins can communicate with each other telepathically. As the group fled toward the nearest exit, they reached the gate. Dongjin tried to slam it shut, but some goblins managed to shove their hands through. The group rushed forward to help Dongjin, but their combined efforts seemed completely futile. As more goblins from the other side pushed against the gate, there were simply too many goblins. And just as they were about to finally break through, all the other people came to help push the door closed. But it was simply no use. A goblin, using nothing but raw strength, was holding the door and pushing. And so, several other goblins started to pile up, making their desperate situation even worse. At this absolutely critical moment, the large man unleashed his gorilla strength ability to shut the gate. All alone, straining with every fiber of his being, the large man yelled to himself that he had to stop them right there. He had to do this, no matter what it took. Dongjin quickly yelled to the large man that everyone was safe now, and urged him to come back to them soon. The man tried to escape along with the others, but the goblins successfully managed to breach through the gate, which caused him to fall hard onto the ground. The large man desperately yelled for Dongjin to leave without him, but Dongjin froze, not knowing what he should do. Suddenly, Deoksu charged forward, smashing a goblin with his heavy club, and attempting to pull the large man back to safety. However, a goblin managed to grab the man's leg, holding him firmly in place. At that very instant, a goblin with ravenous eyes began to stare at everyone. Its expression showed a deep hunger for what it saw as a juicy, fattened piece of meat. But just as the goblins were closing in, the large man simply disappeared without a trace. Shocked, Deoksu froze in place, completely bewildered, unable to comprehend what in the hell had just transpired. Meanwhile, the goblin swarm started to advance upon it. A goblin then leaped forward to attack him, but Deoksu once again smashed it hard with his club, sending it flying backwards. Deoksu then began to run toward his teammates, deftly avoiding the vicious goblin's attacks. His teammates quickly gave him cover by firing arrows at the goblins, creating a large enough opening for Deoksu to escape unharmed. The group continued their frantic retreat, desperately trying to avoid being swallowed by the relentless goblin swarm. In the dark of night, beneath the pale moonlight, the entire apartment building was completely silent. But down in the basement, a monstrous beast, a truly terrifying one, was consuming goblins one by one, ripping apart their bodies, crushing and chewing the goblins like candy. It eradicated every last goblin with terrifying ease, and then, in a rage, it turned its fiery gaze toward the main building. Its only thought was to slaughter everyone who was inside, propelled by an endless and insatiable hunger for more flesh to eat and then evolve. On the other hand, the large man suddenly fell to the ground with a heavy thud. The man was absolutely certain he would not survive this day. He was convinced the goblins would make him into their dinner, but he was also bewildered. He did not understand where he was. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun was now standing right in front of the large man, and, with a very friendly voice, asked him how he was feeling. The man was both shocked and filled with worry. But Jae-hyun, with a kind and gentle smile, helped him to his feet. Jae-hyun was glad he had made the man his vassal, because it enabled him to teleport him there. The large man's leg, however, was badly bruised and was bleeding from a deep goblin scratch. The man was unable to comprehend anything. Before he could fully process, Jae-hyun saw the severe gash on the large man's leg. The man tried to brush it off, claiming it was nothing and that it would just heal on its own. But Jae-hyun saw that the man couldn't even move his injured leg. This was a very serious predicament. Jaehyun told the man to stay put and rushed back to his room. Upon his arrival, Jaehyun grabbed his personal first aid kit. He recalled how his mother had once taught him how to do first aid. In case of emergencies, Jaehyun possessed an infinite supply of antiseptic pills and medical supplies. He basically had all kinds of medical resources. However, his supreme shut-in inventory only contained 40 slots, so he couldn't bring everything. He needed to be very strategic. After contemplating for a second, Jaehyun had a stroke of genius. He put all the medicine in the first aid kit and placed the entire kit in one inventory slot. It was a brilliant and clever idea. Jaehyun started to wonder if he stored an entire room that was full of medicine, or a massive box full of medical supplies, would he be able to replicate them? This single thought seemed to change his entire outlook. After getting prepared, Jaehyun returned to the injured man. He withdrew the first aid kit and asked the man to show him his leg. The man reluctantly exposed his leg, and blood was now freely pouring from the open wound. While cleaning away the blood, Jaehyun warned the man that his condition was extremely serious. He explained that if the wound became badly infected, the man might even end up losing his entire leg. While Jaehyun was treating the deep wound, the man winced from the sharp pain. Suddenly, a brand new system notification appeared, declaring that the man's trust in Jaehyun had increased quite significantly. Finally, Jaehyun completed dressing the entire wound. He then instructed the man to go to his room and get some rest. The man, still in pain but deeply thankful, obeyed his command. Afterward, Jaehyun calmly closed his eyes and once again activated his supreme Shut-in's omniscient eyes. He saw that down in the basement, Rin was relentlessly slaying goblins with her powerful bow. She moved with deadly accuracy, eliminating goblin after goblin. The great goblin hunt had just begun. Deoxu was smashing all the goblins with his club like a madman. They were all taking turns slaying goblins and then fleeing upstairs, a short while earlier, when the large man had suddenly vanished right before Deoxu's eyes. From the rear, the group unleashed a hail of arrows on the goblins, every shot a prayer for survival. Suddenly, two goblins lunged at Deoxu from the shadows, their claws ready to rip him to shreds. But from nowhere, Byung-go entered a berserker rage. He swung his club with blinding speed, fueled by some goddamn otherworldly power. And in one devastating arc, he obliterated both their skulls. He didn't fucking stop there. He vaulted forward, landing directly in front of Deoxu, and began to annihilate the goblins one after another. It was like the might of 10 fucking enraged beasts was now coursing through his very veins. Everyone just stared, completely dumbfounded. What the hell just happened? Was Byung-go always this powerful? Well, thanks to his new status as Jaehyun's vassal, the boy was now on a complete and total power trip. Jaehyun observed this mayhem unfold and felt a deep sense of relief. It seemed everyone was safe, at least for now. Taking a moment, he reviewed Byung-go's new status. Byung-go was now level 30. His trust was 55, and his loyalty hit 88. His newly awakened skill was teleportation. That's right, a truly game-breaking A-rank ability. The kid could now warp to any place within his line of sight, and he wasn't limited to himself. He could bring others with him. Jaehyun beamed like a proud, scheming father, thinking that making Byung-go his vassal was the absolute best choice. Meanwhile, Byung-go was still riding his combat high, demolishing goblins in every single direction. Deoxu, taking in the sheer carnage, turned his head toward Jaehyun. The spectacled boy looked like he was about to pass out. He asked if Jaehyun was ready to proceed. Jaehyun nodded, his expression determined. The group steeled themselves for the next phase. Deoxu shouted to Rin, asking if the water tank was in position. Rin gave him the confirmation. At that very moment, Byung-go came sprinting up the stairs, luring an entire goblin army. Byung-go leaped up the final steps, and as soon as he cleared the top, the group tipped the massive water tank, dousing the goblins below. The goblins were soaked through, but it wasn't enough to stop them. That's when Dongan snatched a nearby extension cord and jammed it straight into the wall socket. Exposed wires hidden on the stairs lit up, and a massive electrical current shot through the water. The weaker goblins, those pathetic level 6s and 7s, the bullshit ones were fried like chicken in a damn air fryer. But the level 10 goblins, those tough bastards, were still standing. The system alerted Jaehyun that he just gained a massive EXP boost, and a huge deposit of 3,446. 410. It all went directly into his supreme wallet. Jaehyun let out a smirk. because he had just leveled up, making his skills even more broken. But then things got strange. Jaehyun felt a bizarre pain in his core. His heart began to hammer like he had just sprinted a marathon. His entire body felt as if it were being set ablaze. Suddenly, a deep purple shield started to materialize around it. This energy field expanded, surging through the building and down into the basement. Every high-level goblin caught within it began to freeze solid. The system informed Jaehyun that a hostile entity was detected inside his domain. Jaehyun just grinned, because now it was time to show these little shits who was really in charge. With a single, unspoken command, the goblins snared inside the shield popped like fucking water balloons. Crimson gore splattered in every direction, painting the concrete walls like a cheap horror film. Hundreds of goblins were instantly annihilated. On a different level, another goblin party had gathered, preparing their own assault on the building, completely oblivious to their impending doom. Suddenly, a large goblin sensed a presence behind it. When spun around, it saw a fucking colossal beast standing there. Before the goblin could even react, the beast sank its fangs into its fleshy body, killing it in a single bite, and savagely devouring the juicy meat like a goddamn appetizer. Witnessing this gruesome spectacle, the other goblins were frozen in terror. But before they could flee, the beast charged directly at them, mowing through their ranks like a fucking lawnmower, shredding goblins to bits with its massive claws. Some moronic goblins tried to flank it and attack from behind. They actually managed to land a few pathetic blows, but the beast didn't even flinch, swatting them aside like they were garbage. Some goblins, probably overflowing with stupidity, climbed onto the beast, biting and clawing at its thick hide. The beast let loose a roar of absolute rage as they gnawed on its face and toward its body. The pain was immense, but the beast thought, with a world-shattering roar. The beast grabbed every goblin clinging to it and ripped them to shreds. Fragments of goblin bodies flew everywhere, blood splattering the scene like a slasher film. The beast then stomped on the remaining corpses, crushing them into a sickening, bloody pulp. The goblin threat was completely and utterly eliminated. But then, from out of nowhere, a system alert appeared, announcing that the beast had been granted fucking citizenship. Suddenly, the giant beast began to contract. Its massive, blood-soaked form was drained of its power, and, holy hell, it started to change shape. In a few seconds, voila, the beast was no more, and in its place stood a beautiful woman, completely naked as the day she was born, but caked in gore. She collapsed, unconscious on the floor. Jaehyun, witnessing all of this through his supreme Shatin's omniscient eye, was utterly and completely speechless. He stammered, "Was that?" A system window appeared, dropping even more bombshells. The woman's name is Oh Yeonju, and her special skill is Dress Up Bear. Another prompt explained that Dress Up Bear permits the user to transform into a goddamn monster, maximizing all of their physical and regenerative capabilities. Jaehyun was impressed. This woman was level 33 with an A rank ability. Then, more notifications rolled in. Dongjun and Heron's trust levels had reached 50, unlocking their loyalty stat. And Deoksu, his loyalty had now surpassed 30, meeting all the conditions to be registered as a vassal. Jaehyun grinned to himself and told the system to register Deoksu. Boom! Another powerful vassal was added to his team. Deoksu was granted the skill Iron Knight, and a system notification then explained that Iron Knight allows its user to summon a deadly halberd and a full suit of iron armor. Jaehyun understood something critical. The higher his vassal's base levels, the more potent their awakened abilities would become. He began to analyze his vassals one by one. The large man, with the might of a gorilla, had a C-rank skill and was level 20. Deoksu, who now possessed the Iron Knight skill, a B-rank ability, was at level 25. Byungo, with the A-rank teleportation skill, was already at level 30. Jaehyun thought about this more deeply. From the moment they were all registered as his vassals, their initial levels seemed to be determined based on the power rank of their awakened abilities. However, a single question still troubled him. Are the skill ranks assigned completely at random? He considered it. If Byungo received an A-rank skill matching his loyalty score, then why did the large man, with a much higher loyalty score, only receive a C-rank skill? After all, Deoksu had acquired a B-rank skill with a loyalty value of just 31. Confused, he thought about it further. It would be a huge advantage to know the factors that determine the acquisition of higher rank abilities. This information was absolutely crucial, especially since he could only ever register 10 total vassals. It would be strategically wise to register someone with a latent potential to unlock a high rank ability. Finally, Jaehyun muttered to himself, Not knowing what might happen if he registers a metahuman as a vassal is a problem. His thoughts were cut short by a system notification. The metahuman can now move unimpeded between stairwells, elevators, and hallways. After weighing this new information, Jaehyun headed toward the elevator and used his supreme Shatin's omniscient eyes to observe. The woman was still lying motionless on the cold floor. Jaehyun then summoned the large man, who arrived in an instant as the elevator doors slid open. Jaehyun gave him his orders, explaining that on basement level 2, he would find a woman, and he needed the man to bring her up here. Meanwhile, his teammates were busy tying up the defeated goblins with rope, trying to make sense of all the chaos. It appeared that all the goblins had been scared and fleeing from something. Jaehyun was particularly stunned, realizing he had greatly underestimated the sheer power of the ability that they had all just witnessed. He was in awe, seeing how Jaehyun, with just a simple snap of his fingers, had popped all the goblins like it was absolutely nothing. Donghyun recalled several past moments, like when the man spoke about Jaehyun's godlike abilities, and even mentioned things like having hot water. Connecting all the different dots, he deduced that this must also be a part of Jaehyun's powers. He remembered that the man's wife had once said that the provisions for their meal were all supplied by Jaehyun. Deep in his thoughts, Donghyun concluded all of this was intrinsically linked to Jaehyun's abilities. Donghyun wondered why Jaehyun was so overwhelmingly strong that he might not even need the help of anyone. But still, he chose to help everyone in this ruined world. Donghyun's faith and trust in Jaehyun increased even more. Thinking now about Byung-go, Donghyun noted Byung-go had always been a total introvert, but after he had met Jaehyun, he changed, acting more like a psycho killer. For a moment, while collecting all the wires, the only coherent thought in Donghyun's mind was, Jaehyun is such a terrifyingly powerful individual, and his abilities are to be deeply feared. On the other hand, the large man is seen dashing to basement level 2 to rescue the woman. While Donghyun continued with his train of thought, he contemplated how fortunate they all were that Jaehyun had chosen. Meanwhile, Jaehyun, with his supreme Shatin's omniscient eye, was observing every little detail, remaining vigilant and planning his next move. After this, the scene fades into a sudden flashback. An absolutely adorable child is playing with his small toy car. He turns around, his face full of glee, and calls out for his mom, asking if she can come and play with him, too. Then, the very same woman, who had transformed from a monster into a human earlier, appears. She's playing with her young son in a loving and gentle way, while the small child waves his tiny hand with pure happiness. But this joy was tragically short-lived. The color completely vanished from her face when she saw something horrific. She was petrified and let out a blood-curdling scream. Her son, still smiling and calling for her to come and play, had not noticed the imminent danger right behind him. 3 ravenous goblins, drooling and prepared to devour him alive. The woman was seized by a fierce urge to protect her only son. She ran as fast as her legs could possibly carry her, but she was far too late. The goblins, with their unquenchable hunger, would not let such a delicious meal escape them. In an instant, they ripped the child to pieces and consumed him. Right before her very eyes, the woman witnessed her son's savage murder, and it completely shattered her from the inside out. This horrifying nightmare jolted her awake. With a sudden gasp, the woman, Yeonju, woke up horrified and completely drenched in a cold sweat. She cried out loudly, sitting bolt upright in the bed, her chest heaving. Standing nearby was Jaehyun, who greeted her with a calm demeanor. Jaehyun observed her for a moment and then asked how she was doing. Yeonju, still feeling completely disoriented, clutched her head, trying to figure out where she was. Meanwhile, Jaehyun offered his hand and formally introduced himself, saying that he was pleased to finally meet her. However, Yeonju remained wary of Jaehyun and asked him a single, direct question. "Were you the one who did that job earlier?" Jaehyun looked perplexed, not understanding what Yeonju was referring to, but she pressed on, asking, "Were you the one who made the goblins' heads explode like balloons?" It turns out that while Yeonju was passed out, Jaehyun had used his domain expansion ability to kill the goblins, which made their heads pop just like balloons. While Jaehyun tried to offer her his hand once again, Yeonju recoiled, her voice now shaking. She confirmed that it was, in fact, Jaehyun who had killed the goblins. This new information made her even more suspicious and distrustful. Her apprehension of Jaehyun intensified, as his incredible power was undeniably terrifying. He could wipe out an entire goblin platoon in a single instant, like crushing ants beneath his boot. Yeonju's thoughts took a very dark turn. She started to wonder if she were as powerful as Jaehyun. Perhaps she could have saved her dear son. Overcome by immense grief, she began to shake and weep again. She cursed her own ability, lamenting that it had awakened too late. If it had only manifested earlier, maybe her son would still be alive and well. Through her heavy tears, Yeonju called out Jaehyun's name. Her voice trembled, and she looked completely and utterly broken. Jaehyun, caught off guard, watched her with an intense gaze. Yeonju, with a desperate and sorrowful tone, pleaded with Jaehyun, asking if he could save her son. Deep in her heart, she knew her son was gone, but she begged Jaehyun to at least avenge him by killing every last fucking goblin in the world. And with that declaration, another goblin slayer was just born. Hyunju sat on the bed and just sobbed, her entire body racked with tremors. Jaehyun stood nearby, quietly watching her overwhelming display of sadness. The room was now filled with the sound of her heartbreaking cries. Jaehyun contemplated the terrible tragedy she had endured. As a shut-in, he was not very good at interacting with other people. He honestly had no idea how to console this grieving mother. As Yeonju was weeping, the system suddenly alerted Jaehyun that Yeonju's personal trust in him had increased dramatically. Yeonju continued to cry, telling Jaehyun how much she truly missed her son. Seeing her immense pain, Jaehyun could not think of how to help. He understood that the goblins had devoured her only child. Jaehyun wondered if there was anything at all that he could do. Then, a plan formed. What if he assigned Yeonju a mission with a reward that could somehow revive her son? Although he knew it was probably impossible, he decided he had to try. Jaehyun crafted a mission just for Yeonju. He wrote in the mission description that if Yeonju slayed 1,000 goblins, the reward would be that her son would be brought back to life. Instead of doing nothing, Jaehyun felt he was compelled to try. Jaehyun prayed that this impossible mission would actually work. He knew there was typically no way to bring back the dead, but in this completely fucked up world, anything at all seemed possible. However, as soon as Jaehyun applied the new mission to Yeonju, the system delivered a massive shock. It notified Jaehyun that he lacked the required funds to provide the resurrection reward. This incredible discovery hit him like a truck. If Jaehyun could somehow acquire enough funds, he would be able to bring anyone back from the dead. His entire body began to tremble with excitement. This revelation changed absolutely everything. At that moment, Jaehyun truly understood the potential of his new role. He was the system itself. He could become the god of this new world. Still, Jaehyun knew he needed far more money to make this a reality. The main problem was that the system did not specify how much money would be needed. Despite this major uncertainty, Jaehyun refused to abandon hope. Yeonju was still weeping, and Jaehyun then called out her name. He told her there might be a way to bring back her son. Upon hearing these words, Yeonju was completely stunned. She felt as if someone had just shot her. She felt both surprise and sadness all at once. But she also suspected Jaehyun might be toying with her. She warned him, if this is some kind of cruel joke, stop it right now. If not, I will never, ever forgive you. Jaehyun reassured her, stating that there was indeed a method, but it will be extremely difficult. Upon hearing this, Yeonju became desperate. She told Jaehyun she would be willing to do anything for him, even warm his bed at night or become his personal slave. Jaehyun cut her off and said there was no need for any of that. She simply had to accomplish one thing, which he promised he would explain her later. After that, the scene changes and Jaehyun introduces Yeonju to Dong. Dongan greeted her warmly and gave her a firm handshake. Yeonju also introduced herself, but her demeanor remained somewhat guarded. She then asked Donjayan a single, direct question. Were you the one who was killing goblins with a baseball bat? And was Rin the same girl who used a bow to slay goblins? At hearing such a very precise description, both Donjayan and Rin were completely shocked. They couldn't understand who this woman was or how she knew about them. Rin then asked Yeonju if they had ever met somewhere before. Yeonju tried to break the heavy tension, made her hand look just like a bear's paw, and acted cute, saying they must have definitely met her before. She playfully asked if they truly did not recognize her. Dongan, Rin, and Deoksu were all extremely confused, wondering what in the hell this woman was talking about. Yeonju smiled with a newfound confidence and decided to activate her powerful beast transformation. Bit by bit, dark fur started to appear all over her body. A deep and very menacing aura began to emerge, and soon her whole body was covered in thick, dark fur. The very instant that Yeonju finished her transformation, Rin recognized her and was about to let out a scream. Yeonju now stood nearly 3 meters in height, looking like a completely terrifying, deadly beast prepared to attack anyone in her path. Rin and the others finally understood that she was the same beast that had blocked their path in the dark basement, slaying goblins like a complete psycho. Upon seeing their shocked reactions, Yeonju let out a laugh. This moment amused her slightly, and she put a hand to her face, saying that to be more accurate, she was actually a bear, not some generic beast. She then assured them all that she was not an enemy. In fact, she then explained that she had helped them by killing goblins down in the basement many different times, but they had never once noticed. Instead, they had assumed she was a beast that wanted to kill them too. Finally, Deoksu and Dongjin realized that Yeonju was telling them the truth. The beast had never once attacked them directly. She was killing the very goblins that were about to end all their lives. Dongjin approached Yeonju with a great deal of joy and said that their encounter down in the basement was not a mere coincidence. Yeonju agreed and declared that her true sworn enemy is the goblins. She vowed to completely exterminate every last goblin in this world. She then added that the enemies of goblins are her allies, thus marking the official birth of another goblin slayer. While this important conversation was continuing, Jaehyun came up from behind them. He voiced his happiness that everyone had been properly introduced. However, his expression grew stern as he announced something of importance. He told them all that there was no more time to waste. By tomorrow morning, they must begin the plan to go and rescue Byung-go's grandmother. Now that the total number of goblins has been drastically reduced, this was the absolute perfect moment to proceed. Jaehyun then told the group that he would not be able to join the battle due to his own fatal injury. Instead, Mrs. Yeonju would accompany Deoksu and Dongyin's party to go and kill the goblins. At hearing the term goblin hunter, Yeonju was extremely happy. Jaehyun gave his final order to everyone, commanding them all to get some rest. He reminded them all that they would begin the mission as soon as they awoke the very next morning. As the group began to head off to their respective rooms, Jaehyun called both Deoksu and Byung-go aside. The scene shifts, and Jaehyun has led them into a small, quiet room. He asked them, "Do you have any idea why I brought you here?" The two of them looked at him with great confusion. Jaehyun, with a very serious expression, asked if they knew why he had summoned them to this place. Deoksu had no clue, but Byung-go was a little bit suspicious. He took a small chance and asked Jaehyun if he had called them there to discuss their abilities. Jaehyun let out a sinister grin and said that Byung-go was correct. Both Jaehyun and Byung-go have successfully unlocked their awakened abilities. The two were stunned to learn this. Jaehyun then told Byung-go that his awakened ability is called teleportation. Upon hearing the word teleportation, Byung-go broke into a massive smile. Jaehyun then informed Deoksu that his awakened ability is called Iron Knight. Deoksu was completely baffled. What does Iron Knight even mean? Would he be able to summon some kind of knight? Jaehyun, with a grim and serious face, decided he would have to train the two of them first, because they both needed to master their powers to finish their tasks. That is why Jaehyun then unlocked his system's notification and generated a brand new mission for the two of them. The mission stated that both must discover their own awakened abilities. They would need to unlock their awakened powers for the very first time. The time limit given was just 1 hour. The reward for success was an increase in their personal strength, and the punishment for failure was that both must sleep outside. Jaehyun was about to issue the mission to the two of them. At the same time, Deoksu, looking super excited, asked Jaehyun if Deoksu had also unlocked his own awakened ability. Would he be able to wield his powers just like Dongyun? Jaehyun confirmed that he would. Hearing this, Deoksu became even more excited and began to jump around like a little child and shouted that he could not wait to use his Iron Knight ability. Iron Knight sounded incredibly cool. After that, Jaehyun explained the details to Deoksu that he could summon a full suit of iron armor and a halberd from hell by using his Iron Knight ability. While Deoksu was listening to Jaehyun and was about to ask a question, at that very instant, right before Deoksu's eyes, Byung-go simply vanished with a pop. At seeing this, Deoksu was completely stunned and stood completely still for a moment. Both Jaehyun and Deoksu stood there in absolute silence. After a brief pause, Byung-go teleported from his original spot and reappeared a short distance away. Seeing this, Byung-go was both surprised and incredibly happy. Byung-go simply could not believe that he thought he could teleport a little ways away. And as soon as he had the thought, he actually teleported. Byung-go clenched his fists and said that with this new ability, he could now definitely save his dear grandma. On the other side, Deoksu notified Jaehyun that Byung-go's trust level in Jaehyun had increased quite dramatically. The very next moment, Byung-go, bowing his head from the bottom of his heart, thanked Jaehyun and told him that from this day forward, he would place his complete faith in Jaehyun. Everything that Jaehyun said, he would do for Jaehyun. For Jaehyun, Byung-go would be able to go and save his grandma. But Jaehyun informed Byung-go that he shouldn't celebrate just yet, because it would still be quite difficult. for him to get to his grandmother's apartment. At the moment, upon hearing this news, Byung-go was a little bit disappointed. He now possessed the teleportation ability, so he could just warp directly to his grandmother's house. But Jaehyun stated there was no guarantee that Byung-go would be able to control his newfound ability very well. At the moment, Byung-go didn't even know how far he could teleport, or for how long he could even teleport at one time. First, Byung-go would have to completely master his teleportation power, because it shouldn't be the case that while he was teleporting, Byung-go got himself stuck midway to his grandmother's house, or he fell unconscious and the goblins ended up killing Byung-go. After hearing this, Byung-go was a little bit crestfallen, but he understood that everything Jaehyun was saying seemed logical. So, Byung-go would need to wait a bit longer to go save his grandma. But while Jaehyun and Byung-go were still talking, an extremely bright flash of light shone from behind them. Seeing this, both Byung-go and Jaehyun were startled, and the next moment, as soon as Jaehyun and Byung-go spun around, we were shown a massive statue holding a very large iron axe in its hand, which looked incredibly dangerous. This was none other than our boy, Deoksu. Deoksu had summoned his Iron Knight, and Deoksu's body now had a very thick, powerful, and magically enchanted suit of iron armor, and he was now holding a very large iron axe. Upon seeing such thick and cool-looking armor and a new weapon, Deoksu's trust level in Jaehyun surged. The system then notified Jaehyun that Deoksu's trust and loyalty scores had increased dramatically. Deoksu was now dancing around happily. On the other hand, Jaehyun told Byung-go to try and teleport to the building next door. This would be Byung-go's very first assigned mission. If he could easily manage to teleport to the building next door, it would mean he was using his new ability quite well. Byung-go looked over at the building next door, stood completely still for a while, and was determined to teleport there. On the other hand, Jaehyun also created a brand new mission just for Byung-go, in which it was written that he would have to teleport to the building next door within a 3-minute time limit. The reward for success would be an increase in his teleportation skill. Byung-go concentrated, and from behind him, Deoksu tried to boost his confidence, offering him some encouragement. Byung-go, with a serious face, thought about teleporting to the building next door, and in a flash, he disappeared from his current spot. The next moment, he had successfully teleported to the building next door. Byung-go waved his hand, while looking at Jaehyun from the window of the building next door, and Jaehyun was also quite happy to see that Byung-go had already used teleportation over a relatively long distance. Byung-go also happily waved his hand from inside that building. At that same moment, suddenly, there was a sudden darkness in front of Byung-go's eyes, and he immediately fell unconscious, collapsing inside of the building. Upon seeing this, Deoksu and Jaehyun were quite scared. What had just happened to Byung-go so suddenly? Jaehyun did not wait for a single second. He summoned Byung-go back with his summoning ability, and then put him down to sleep. Jaehyun quickly checked Byung-go's system notification, and saw that his health was in stable condition. Byung-go was merely sleeping. So, Jaehyun figured that either his mana ran out, or again, his limit was only to teleport over a very short distance. If Byung-go tried to teleport further than that, all of his energy would be depleted, and he would fall unconscious. Jaehyun explained all of this to Deoksu, that Byung-go was actually completely fine. After a short period of rest, Byung-go would regain consciousness. Following that, Jaehyun abruptly turned to Deoksu and asked if he liked to exercise. Deoksu did not understand this question. Why was Jaehyun suddenly inquiring about exercise? In the very next moment, Jaehyun gave Deoksu the One Punch Man training regimen task. Jaehyun then created a new mission just for Deoksu, in which he would have to perform 100 push-ups, 100 squats, and run 10 meters, all in 10 minutes. The reward was a permanent increase in his strength, and the punishment was sleeping out in the open. And Deoksu had to do all of this with his new armor on. Deoksu did not waste a single second. He immediately began doing the push-ups, the squats, and the run, all with his heavy armor on. Deoksu quickly finished all the push-ups and squats, but he began to pant heavily. Jaehyun watched him from behind, and thought that Deoksu had completed this task with such ease. Maybe this was because Deoksu was already an athlete who played sports. Because of this, Deoksu's physical endurance was already quite good. While Jaehyun was considering all of this, a chamber for their own private union, while the others were forced to share rooms. but a simple condition had to be met first. Hearing these words, the pair was utterly stunned. Jae-hyun, radiating a dark and fearsome aura, laid out with chilling precision the challenge they faced. Just deliver one simple message to the masses. The decree was stark, yet incredibly alluring. Whoever slaughtered 100 goblins the swiftest would seize for themselves an entire untouched room, outfitted with every essential amenity. Boundless power, endless water, sustenance, truly all one needed for a comfortable life. Only 100 pathetic goblin lives. A simple task. The famed goblin slayer himself would surely be damn proud of Jihan at this moment. Jihan elaborated with an icy tone, declaring their sole duty was to draw people from all corners to him, enlisting them into his domain as citizens. And to earn this right, they just had to slay 100 goblins. In that moment, Jae-hyun was mirroring the master manipulator, Lloyd, deftly pulling the strings of every soul. With a dark smirk, Jae-hyun finalized the new directive. Annihilate 100 goblins and claim limitless resources. Meanwhile, the perspective shifted violently. We witness a man in a crimson jacket, hounded by goblins, fighting desperately for his life. He was on the brink of capture when, by some fate, he plunged through an open doorway, a narrow escape. He slid across the floor, barely preserving his own life. The goblins gave chase, but they jammed themselves trying to breach the tight door. Lying in wait just beyond that threshold, his allies stood poised and ready, prepared to slaughter the goblins. It became clear the poor red jacket soul was nothing but bait. Thanks to this cold, calculated stratagem, the squad exterminated the goblins with ease, transforming the skirmish into a brutal, one-sided bloodbath. And the ringleader of this entire party, this absolute cretin whom I've dubbed Dumbass Number 1, hurled his spear, felling the final goblin. He flaunted his kill, but the red jacket man was far from pleased. After all, he was the one who had to perpetually risk his neck, while the others claimed effortless kills. Enraged, he voiced his bitter grievance about the injustice of always being used as mere cannon fodder. Hearing this, Dumbass rage ignited, and he frostily informed the red jacket man he was worthless, a pathetic weakling, stating that without his protection, the red jacket man would surely have died a dog's death. Dumbass then commanded him to behave like an obedient hound, or he'd swiftly become the next meal for the goblins. The tension in the air crackled, giving the red jacket man no choice but to offer an apology. The scene shifts once more, and Dumbass, smug and sure he had slain 100 goblins, marched to claim his promised prize. But to his utter, bitter shock, Dabin had already awarded that prize to the first crew that finished the objective. And here's the kicker. It turns out that Dabin's very own brother was first to kill 100 goblins, who gave the coveted room to an elderly couple. Dumbass did not take this news well. Seething with rage, he instantly began to protest loudly about how utterly rigged the whole arrangement was. Abhin's sibling then calmly revealed that Jae-hyun had a special provision prepared just for Dumbass squad. They were directed to head to the 30th floor for their prize. Though Dumbass was absolutely livid, he had no recourse but to begrudgingly head to the 30th floor. En route, Dumbass wore a vile and condescending smirk, wondering why Dabin revered Jae-hyun so deeply. It's absurd. You really think Jae-hyun is some kind of deity? He carried on, openly deriding Jae-hyun, labeling him as nothing but a laughable cult messiah. But then, the red jacket man, whose real name was revealed as Shungmin, quietly voiced his dissent. He argued that, since Jae-hyun was truly aiding and shielding them, they shouldn't dare speak ill of him, especially when it was obvious. Everyone wished to remain in Jae-hyun's good graces. Dumbass glared at him, his gaze like ice. He clearly despised that sentiment. With a bone-chilling stare, he silently conveyed that this discussion was far from finished. The elevator doors slid open onto the 30th floor. Dumbass, still simmering, muttered icily to Shungmin that they would settle their conversation later. But as they stepped out, Jae-hyun calmly greeted them. His frigid presence was almost tangible. With one hand casually tucked in his pocket, his cold gaze swept over every one of them. The entire party instantly went dead silent, completely overwhelmed by Jae-hyun's imposing stature. Dumbass swiftly regained his composure and politely introduced his crew, trying to dispel the crushing atmosphere. But Jae-hyun merely shook his hand nonchalantly, coolly praising their unorthodox use of the barrier and their ingenious hunting methods. Dumbass froze, completely taken aback, and anxiously questioned how Jae-hyun could know their tactics. Jae-hyun, however, didn't deign to reply. Instead, he effortlessly pivoted to the real matter at hand. He coldly declared that electricity Water and gas would now be restored to units 1301 and 1502. Dumbass, still skeptical, warily asked how such a feat was even possible. Jaehyun answered coolly, stating it was because they had slain their 100 goblins. You earned this. Then, without a moment's hesitation, a profoundly disturbing and unsettling smirk slowly crept across Jaehyun's face, in a voice laced with frost. Jaehyun referenced Dumbass' earlier jest, specifically the remark about him being a cult leader. Jaehyun icily declared that he had zero interest whatsoever in being worshipped like a deity, or playing such a preposterous role. The entire squad stood there, speechless, absolutely petrified and bewildered. How on earth did Jaehyun overhear what Dumbass had uttered? In the elevator? Were there surveillance cameras everywhere? Jaehyun, with a genuinely maniacal grin, abruptly and smoothly shifted the topic, casually mentioning he had a minor favor to request of them. The scenery cuts away violently, revealing the exact favor Jaehyun had tasked Dumbass with. Dumbass and his crew were fleeing for their very lives, pursued by massive and horrifying orcs. Each monstrous footfall made the very earth tremble beneath them. Dumbass, gasping for air, was terrified to his core. They veered sharply, desperately funneling into a tight alley, just as intended. At the alley's corner stood Dongyang, spear gripped tight, with a narrow passage impeding their advance. The orcs were bottlenecked for a precious moment. Just as planned, Dong Jian's throwing skill had ascended to rank B, meaning he could now launch heavier projectiles, with 5 times the destructive power. With all his might, Dong Jian hurled the spear fast and true, impaling the lead orc and sending it crashing down. The second orc charged in a rage, swinging its colossal club, but before it struck Dong Jian, a lethal arrow found its mark in its forehead, felling it instantly. This perfect shot came from Guyon. The final orc had scant time to even react, before Dong Jian ended it with another mighty spear toss. And with that, the squad had successfully fulfilled the mission of killing 100 orcs, and Jaehyun was instantly rewarded with 3.2 million won. Nearby, a petrified family of 3 watched, frozen in shock. Having seen the slaughter, Dong Jaehyun smiled gently at them, calmly ushering them towards Jaehyun's fortress. As they neared, Jaehyun was suddenly hit with a system pop-up, announcing that an unknown entity was attempting to enter. A second alert materialized at that same instant, signaling that someone qualified for citizenship had appeared. The system promptly inquired if Jaehyun wished to bestow citizenship upon the 3 newcomers. After a moment's thought, he confirmed the decision. The total citizen count now reached 200, unlocking a powerful new skill, tax collection. This power allowed Jaehyun to claim 10% of his citizens' earnings, without touching their actual currency, though it had a 30-day cool-down period. Jaehyun grasped the immense potential of this new power. He understood he could now reclaim the very funds he'd given out. However, reclaiming the entire sum would require roughly 10 months, with the pressing need to rescue his parents. Jaehyun immediately resolved that dawn. Hyun's team must venture directly to the Nambu Min district to accelerate his grand design. Jaehyun chose to pay out 30% of the funds up front, viewing it as a crucial investment. Suddenly, another system notification flashed. Jaehyun's house declaration skill had just ascended to level 10, bestowing upon him 3 more precious skill points. Once again, Jaehyun was seized by a searing pain. His liver, kidneys, and heart throbbed as his domain expanded explosively, nearly doubling its reach and engulfing almost every structure nearby. The system verified that Jaehyun had successfully claimed the entire complex as his territory. In the next instant, another alert materialized, announcing 1 billion won had been deposited as a subsidy, and a brand new construction feature was now unlocked. Jaehyun's gaze swept across the displayed choices intently. A solar generator for 133 million, a general store for 219 million, a gymnasium for 300 million. On top of that, Jaehyun had been granted a massive 1 billion won subsidy, but the yearly revenue from the solar generator was a mere 30 million, 1 per annum. This meant it would require at least 5 entire years to just break even on the generator's cost. Jaehyun stood there, bewildered. What kind of catastrophic business model was this? Deciding it was likely a wiser move not to squander this vast sum on dubious building projects. Jaehyun instead resolved to empower his vassals. But then, to his complete astonishment, Jaehyun had a critical realization. When he attempted to use this freshly deposited subsidy fund, the 1 billion won, to level up Dong Hyun, the system immediately blocked the transaction. Jae Hyun quickly deduced that the funds he'd just been given were entirely separate from the currency held in his wallet. This realization changed the game. Jae Hyun now possessed an essentially free pool of funds, earmarked specifically for construction projects. Without a second thought, Jae Hyun swiftly chose the solar generator. A 24-hour timer commenced, and his subsidy total fell to 867 million won. Briefly tempted, Jae Hyun thought of installing a second solar generator, but was instantly stopped by a stern system warning. Alert! Only a single generator could be built per apartment complex. Accepting this annoying limitation, Jae Hyun turned his focus to establishing the general store. The system clarified that the store was tied to Jae Hyun's supreme reclusability. Any item in his inventory could be sold directly to his people, which he knew would drastically streamline resource distribution. Without pause, he placed the store in apartment 101. A 48-hour countdown began for its completion. Finally, he considered the gymnasium, which would amplify citizens' strength and training gains by 200%. Picturing how this would skyrocket their growth, Jaehyun dedicated the entire second story to the new gym. A 72-hour timer appeared on screen. The system reminded him of his 3 remaining skill points. Daehoon smirked. He realized he'd unlocked the ultimate infinite cash and EXP exploit. People would now hunt to purchase his goods, and he would rake in EXP and money without lifting a finger. Now that is the definition of passive income. Meanwhile, Deoksu, clad in his armor, cleaved an orc in two. Dongan then asked Deoksu what would occur if he threw a spear. Confused, Deoksu gave him the weapon, and Dongan launched it with absurd power. In a flash, Deoksu was told to dismiss the armor and resummon it. The spear miraculously materialized back in his grasp. Both were stunned. Dongan had just found an infinite projectile exploit. Hyakusa couldn't help but praise Dongan's brilliant mind. At the same time, Gaon was about to fire her final arrow when suddenly, more arrows simply appeared before her. At this rate, Brother Jae-hyun was practically playing a real-life creative mode. Gaon was utterly bewildered. The system displayed a new power, Omni-Focus, which let him employ other skills inside of Jahan's domain. With her quiver refilled, she took down another ORC. The system logged the kill, and Jahan earned a cool 388 won. The objective was cleared, and Gaon leveled up. Jahan knew he could now elevate his vassal's powers, which ignited a fire of hope for saving his parents. Their home was a mere 10 kilometers away. With conviction, Jae-hyun ascended to the rooftop. Feeling the pressure, his aim was to level up Dong Hyun's squad. He checked on Kim Jong's status. Level 22 with the skill Crow, familiar for reconnaissance missions. Next, he pulled up Yinju's profile. Level 33, wielding the power Warrior Bear. Finally, he examined Kim De-young. Level 30 with the abilities Healing, Blessing, and Magic Armor. Jae-hyun assessed the team. Yeonju and Kim De-young were formidable picks, but Yeonju's deficient loyalty gave him pause. He then considered bringing Yeonju's son back from the dead. He attempted the resurrection, but the system declared he lacked the required funds. He decided to bide his time and issued a group quest. Hunt a level 40 or greater beast within 24 hours. The prize, the revival of Yinju's son. Failure meant certain death. He selected yes, and the quest was set. Suddenly, a frantic knock rattled the door. It was Yeonju, completely out of breath. She had sprinted the moment she saw the quest. Jae-hyun confirmed it was possible, but their time was running short. Yeonju collapsed, weeping, thanking him profusely. The system showed her loyalty past 30. She could now become a true vassal. Later, Jae-hyun stood at a sink, watching the faucet obey his will. He was growing accustomed to controlling objects with his mind. Damn, our boy is becoming more like Magneto every day. He now commanded electricity, water, and gas. Today's store earnings, 320,980. One was added to his wallet. He smirked, knowing the store had already sold over 1.5 million won. Jae-hyun observed the people in his store, feeling absolute control. Meanwhile, in another place, a young man asked a comrade about their savings. The friend lamented the bow's price of 150,000 won. He stated they had only 10,000 and it would take 2 weeks. The boy chuckled, reminding him they also had to pay for food. His friend grew exasperated. Jae-hyun mused on how everything shifted once the store opened. Even meager coins drove people to hunt relentlessly. The system displayed the population, 789 of a potential 11,000. Jaehyun was confident that number would soon multiply rapidly. He then received another system alert. He vanquished a level 18 orc and pocketed 1.2 million won. Elsewhere, Yeonju, in her fearsome warrior bear state, was tearing through monsters. Gaeong and Kim Bi-young checked in on her. Yeonju offered an apology for claiming most of the beasts, but Gyeong simply smiled and said it was fine. Jaehyun reflected it was a brilliant move to pair the two of them. He examined Yeonju's new stats. Level 40 with the designation 9th Bell. Her trust and loyalty had climbed to 66. The rank S skill, Berserk, was absolutely insane. When she tasted blood, her power surged by 300%. While contemplating her newfound might, a splintering noise echoed through the air. The three women watched a massive orc crawl from the darkness. Yeonju immediately shifted into her monstrous form, the savage and relentless mother bear, and charged the orc. The clash began, and the two combatants seemed equally powerful. Gaeong loosed an arrow, but the orc deflected it with its axe. Yeonju's fury grew, and the more enraged she became. The more powerful she grew, until she swelled in size and lunged at the orc lord. The now doomed beast had no time to defend itself before Yeonju descended upon him. The system declared her overwhelming victory. She had slain a level 28 orc lord, netting a colossal bounty of 73 million won. Another alert warned she had now unlocked an outpost. The outpost required a knight to occupy it for 7 days, and the cost was a staggering 1.3 billion won. Jin deemed the price too steep and the duration too long. He chose not to construct the outpost for now. He understood the outpost would be vital for his kin, but moving his grandparents would be no simple task. He could only pray they were still alive. With his burning resolve, Jaehyun decided that on the morrow, he would dispatch Donggin's team directly to his family's home. Back in the subway, Kim Jong observed the fight, stunned. He watched Yeonju rip the orc's limb from limb as they shrieked for mercy. Kim Jong marveled at how Jaehyun recruited such a powerful being. Kim Jong observed that Yeonju was zeroed in on the goblins. The system issued a new order: return in 1 hour. Kim Jong understood that even basic missions could turn deadly. Dong Jin's squad then arrived, and he told Kim Jong it was time to head back. Kim Jong dispatched his familiar, Cammy, to scout ahead. Through the eyes of the crow, he reported back that their path was clear. The team proceeded. Kim Jong spotted a rat, which then vanished. He dismissed it, but a strange feeling gnawed at him up the stairs. He glanced behind and saw 2 tiny red glints in the gloom. The same rat he dismissed now darted toward the party, signaling imminent danger. The scene jumps to Jaehyun bowing before Dongjun's party, imploring them for their assistance. Dongjun asked if Jaehyun's kin were alive inside the building. Jaehyun conceded he did not know. He merely required their aid to learn what had transpired. Yoonho stepped forward eagerly, vowing he would do whatever his god, Jaehyun, commanded. The rest of the party voiced their own profound debt to Jaehyun. They swore that every one of them would help him. Jaehyun thanked them all and outlined a new plan. Head to Siamine Station. He advised them all to rest. However, Yeonju questioned him, asking if Jaehyun could not use his powers to summon his family. Jaehyun fell into a pained silence. He recalled that he had attempted this many times, but it was fruitless, as he can only summon those within his domain. He admitted he could not do everything, but he swore he would honor the promise he made to her. The system announced Yeonju's trust level had just climbed. With a smile, Yeonju thanked him. Jaehyun smiled back and urged everyone to get some rest. One by one, they all departed. As soon as the room grew quiet, Jaehyun got another system notification. An unsanctioned being was attempting to breach. He granted it citizenship, and Yijin's profile materialized. Level 31 with 0 trust. Her skill was rat. Queen. Jaehyun was stunned. Had they just acquired a woman who could morph into a rat? Suddenly, we flash back in time to when Yijin first spotted Dangyun's team in the subway, slaying orcs. She chose to trail them and soon reached Jaehyun's sanctuary. Children were playing with joy, and the area was bustling. Yijin, in her rat guise, was in disbelief. She scurried to the apartment, but slammed into a blue barrier. The system interface prompted her. Did she wish to be a citizen? The rat chirped, but there was no response. She grew desperate, but the interface refreshed and bestowed citizenship upon her. The rat dashed into the structure, but mayhem erupted. People shrieked at the sight of the rat and tried to kill it. Yijin fled and stumbled into the training hall, where she witnessed people pumping iron. She was baffled. What kind of muscle-worshipping cult was this? At that moment, Yijin snapped out of her rat state with a headache. She cackled, overjoyed at finding a survivor settlement, but her elation faded. She dreaded the monstrous beast that patrolled the station. She would have to pass to get to Jaehyun's building. Then the view shifts, and we see Jae-hyun had hunted the rat. And because of this, Yejin's link with him was severed. Another window popped up regarding the Rat Queen. Rank A. Her power let every rat obey her, moving as one with her body. Jae-hyun's expression turned grim. He now knew the rat was being commanded by a rank A awakening. He used the Supreme Recluse's eyes to scan for her, but could not locate her. In that moment, a brilliant idea struck Jae-hyun. He issued a simple quest. The Rat Queen must present herself at the apartment in 48 hours. The prize, a Coke and a Choco Bar. While reviewing the quest, Jae-hyun recalled something. He couldn't bring his parents as they were outside his domain, and Yejin was also outside. But since she was a citizen, he decided to run an experiment. Those who become citizens fall under his authority. He altered the quest. The time limit was now only 10 seconds, and the penalty for summon. She would be summoned. Incredible. He stared at the screen, stunned. His heart pounded. This could alter everything. He just hoped it wouldn't cost more than 1 billion won. The timer began. When it reached 0, the system displayed the outcome. CO Yejin failed the quest, and the price was only 31 million won. Jae-hyun felt a wave of immense relief. On the other side of things, a shocked and terrified Yejin materialized inside the apartment. She had no idea what had just occurred. Jae-hyun addressed her by name, revealing that he already knew exactly who she was. She demanded to know who he was and how he knew her. Jae-hyun remained perfectly calm. He stated he was the one who granted her citizenship and summoned her. He introduced himself and offered his reassurance to make her feel a little more at ease. Jae-hyun presented her with a Coke and a Choco Bar. CO Yejin accepted the snack. Trying to process it all, she asked if this was all Jae-hyun's power. He confirmed it. She was bewildered, wondering, who in the hell is this man? A god. She pleaded with Jae-hyun to save the 35 souls in her care. Jae-hyun refused, explaining that it was not possible. Upon hearing this, she began to sob, begging Jae-hyun to rescue her people. Jae-hyun then realized a critical detail. CO Yejin had never directly interacted with him, yet he was still able to grant her citizenship. This implied that the rat familiar was a part of her essence. He wondered if that link could help him retrieve her people. In that instant, the system interface appeared, displaying Yejin's stats. Level 31 with 37 trust. Her ability was Rat Queen. Jae-hyun noted that her trust had already risen. He turned to Yejin and asked if she would do anything to save her family. She swore with conviction that she would. Jae-hyun agreed, stating that there was only one method to rescue her family, but it demanded her absolute trust. She pledged her full faith, and a system notice popped up. Her trust level jumped to 50, and her loyalty to 33. She had met the criteria to become a vassal. Jae-hyun initiated the vassal registration protocol. A blue light enveloped Yejin, and she watched herself, amazed. When the ritual was complete, her stats were completely transformed. She now bore the titles of 10th Seat, Knight, and Tamer. Her trust grew to 52 and loyalty to 33. New data showed that tamed creatures. Rats evolved based on loyalty and trust levels. Jae-hyun saw that Yejin's evolution potential was A+, which meant her tamed rats would continue to grow stronger. Though I wouldn't be shocked if one day her rats develop muscles and start walking on 2 legs. Jae-hyun asked Yejin if any of her rats were near her kin. She hesitated to respond, but he urged her to dispatch one. Yejin obeyed his command. Simultaneously, Jae-hyun activated the Supreme Recluse's eyes and linked the rat's vision with hers. The rat scurried towards Yejin's family. When it got there, food and water materialized before them. Jae-hyun received yet another notification. CO Yejin's trust level had climbed once again. He realized her power, and his eyes created a flawless synergy. He had just acquired the ultimate reconnaissance tool. Yejin asked Jae-hyun if he was referring to the Nambu-mun district. Jae-hyun affirmed. Yejin grew animated. She was familiar with the area. It could send a rat to safely survey the territory. Through the rats, Jae-hyun could verify if his family was alive, without endangering the team's safety. Yejin assured Jae-hyun she would handle it. The system indicated that her trust and loyalty scores rose. Jae-hyun urged her to depart immediately, advising her to use the subway tunnels. But Yejin was horrified and yelled it would be a suicide mission. As a terrifying beast stalked Siamine Station, Jae-hyun, intrigued, pressed her for further details. Yejin described it as a monstrous and savage creature. Jae-hyun, resolute, instructed her to send a rat to scout the beast. Yejin complied. The view cuts to the rat racing frantically toward the subway. Pure terror was etched on the rat's face. An eerie sound echoed, and it witnessed a colossal snake-like beast gnawing on an orc lord's head. With a single gulp, the serpent devoured the entire orc. The rat was scared absolutely witless. The snake spotted it and lunged forward. Miraculously, the rat managed to evade and escape. Jaehyun witnessed the entire event. He understood the snake was far more powerful than he'd anticipated, likely well above level 40. Damn, Jaehyun mused that this terrifying thing probably belonged to Sasuke's summoned serpent in Naruto. Yijin watched Jaehyun's expression and confirmed that Seamyeon Station was too perilous. She proposed skipping a station and moving to the next one, though the journey would be longer. It will be much safer. Yijin reassured Jaehyun, saying his party was powerful enough. Jaehyun thanked Yijin. If not for her intelligence, his party would have walked into a trap. Jaehyun informed Yejin she could take apartment 2701, but she would be responsible for cleaning it. Yejin thanked him and took her leave. The moment Yejin was gone, Jaehyun smirked. Before, he would have had no recourse but to circumvent the beast. Jin's power meant the game had changed. Jaehyun concocted a diabolical scheme. He commanded the system to construct a new solar generator. Jaehyun watched as the panels were assembled, but knew they were insufficient for his 800 citizens to elevate their living standards. They would require far more capital and labor. He devised a ruthless plan, a 3-shift work system, a relentless cycle of maintenance and harvesting. Ultimately, Jihyun knew that a brutal hunting campaign was the answer. Elsewhere, Dongin's team fled from screeching bat-like fiends. Jie Young and her comrades loosed a volley of arrows, slaying them with deadly efficiency. Afterward, she checked to see if any were wounded. Overjoyed to find that everyone was unharmed, she breathed a sigh of relief. However, her sister spoke of the serpent beast lurking in Seamyeon Station. Go-young calmed her fears, stating they would survive as Jaehyun could summon them back. With their resolve hardened, the party pressed onward, only to discover a mangled train wreckage, surrounded by the butchered remains of ORC chieftains. Everyone froze, petrified. The youngest squad member retched. Suddenly, a bone-chilling hiss echoed as they saw a colossal, monstrous snake. Daeaksu let out a shriek of pure terror, but in the very next instant, Dongin seized Jie Young and yelled for everyone to hit the deck. The serpent unleashed a deafening shriek, unleashing a shockwave that sent them all flying backward. The sonic blast was too powerful. The men shielded the women, but everyone's heads felt as if they might split open from the agony. At that precise moment, the system delivered a clear decree, commanding them to slay the serpent. Dang Jian felt a surge of dread, but to his astonishment, the giant snake seemed to be moving sluggishly. Spotting this golden moment of weakness, Dang Jian exchanged a sharp glance with Yeonju, and without pause, he hurled the spear with every ounce of his strength. Flashback to mere moments before. Jaehyun had explained that the giant serpent was infamous for devouring its victims alive. He deduced it ignored smaller creatures. It would just gulp them down whole. Exploiting this flaw, Jaehyun hatched a truly twisted plan. He commanded Yijin to send her tiny rat directly into the beast's nostril, and like a flash, she obeyed, the rat scurrying deep inside the snake's body. This was where Jaehyun's wicked genius truly began to shine. With a cruel smirk, he opened his personal inventory, and from within the rat's form, released a cloud of toxic gas. But that was far from enough. Next, he poured gasoline into the serpent's gut and violently ignited. In a blinding flash, the snake's innards erupted in a fiery inferno, being utterly annihilated from the inside out. The sheer force of the blast shook even Yijin. Jaehyun quickly checked on her, and she confirmed that she was fine. Jaehyun praised her valor and returned his focus to the battle. He surveyed the scene, opting not to land the final blow himself. Instead, he orchestrated for his knights, Dongin and Yeonju, to deliver the coup de grace, so he could harvest 6 times the experience and loot. Returning to the present moment, Dongin and his crew realized the shockwave wasn't from the snake, but from the internal cataclysm Jaehyun had unleashed. Seizing the moment, Dongin hurled the spear with absolute force, killing the great serpent instantly. Immediately, the system flooded Jaehyun with a massive surge of EXP and 1.8 billion won. Since they had toppled the boss of Seamyeon Station, Jaehyun could now establish an outpost within its ruins. Dongjun and Yeonju's powers were greatly amplified, and his domain's level ascended to 15. As an added prize, Jaehyun was granted 3 bonus skill points. A new notification materialized, announcing that people eligible for citizenship had been located. There were approximately 200 souls. Jaehyun granted them citizenship without a second thought. The system promptly updated, declaring that the total citizen count had now surpassed 1,000. Because of this grand achievement, everyone was blessed with a new power known as Baseline, which granted Jae-hyun a 100% share of all EXP and money from all citizens. Upon reading this, Jae-hyun was utterly dumbfounded. This felt like a god-tier cheat code. In that moment, Yi-jin came to him and pleaded with Jae-hyun to bring her people into his sanctuary. Jae-hyun, after a brief pause, smiled and agreed, overcome with relief. Yi-jin thanked him profusely. Jae-hyun asked if she could command her rats once more. Yi-jin confirmed that she could. The scene shifts to Yi-jin's lone rat, which scurried to a new area and met with Dongjin's squad. What they witnessed was a bloodbath. Hundreds of orc corpses lay scattered, half devoured. Yi-jin's rat darted forward, gesturing for the party to follow its lead. Dae-haksa was astonished, wondering if this was yet another of Jae-hyun's godlike powers. Intrigued, the party followed the rat. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun disengaged the supreme recluse's eyes and retreated to his quarters. It was now time for his own ascension. He possessed 3 skill points to invest. As his domain continued to expand, he knew the wisest course was to augment the Omniscient Eye's ability. This power synergized perfectly with Yi-jin's rat familiar, elevating their joint operations. The moment he enhanced the skill, a piercing pain shot through Jae-hyun's skull. Elsewhere, Dong-hyun's party collided with a goblin swarm. Jae-hyun could now perceive the precise levels and stats of these creatures. They were level 8, moved in disciplined formations, wielded spears and clubs, and were terrifyingly agile. They could also see perfectly in the pitch-black tunnels. Witnessing this, Jae-hyun grasped how priceless this enhanced vision was for reconnaissance and pure survival. He began plotting to hunt goblins to absorb this new power, and also recalled his objective of lowering the resurrection price. For this, he planned to issue more quests for others to fight and evolve, conserving his own strength and maximizing their growth. Next, Jae-hyun turned his attention to another skill, dignity maintenance. As his kingdom swelled, upholding trust and loyalty became ever more critical. He spent a skill point to reinforce dignity maintenance. Immediately after, a sharp, Jae-hyun's eyes darted toward the sound, his expression hardening into stone. He realized the shot hadn't come from his complex, but from deep underground. The scene shifts, unveiling a truly bizarre sight. Goblins nonchalantly wielding firearms, dressed in stolen jackets and trousers. When the absolute hell, as the goblins unleashed a hail of fire. Dongjin motioned for everyone to take cover. Bullets whizzed by dangerously close, and they knew they stood no chance in a direct firefight. Dongjin was baffled, wondering how the goblins acquired firearms, but he needn't have worried. Byung-go teleported behind the goblin shooters, and with deadly grace, he pierced through their chests, a blur of motion as he sliced his way through the goblins. Another goblin raised its pistol, but an arrow struck its hand. Simultaneously, Gaeong and Daeaksu charged into the fray, and Yeonju transformed into her savage beast form. United, they slaughtered every last goblin. On the other side of things, a system alert flashed, informing Jae-hyun about a new commodity. Firearms in a store, complete with infinite ammunition. Holy crap, this changed absolutely everything. But Jae-hyun instantly saw the inherent danger. He couldn't just openly sell guns. If the common folk saw guns for purchase, their desire to hunt monsters would surely skyrocket. But he knew not every soul was trustworthy. Until now, he had welcomed everyone into his fold as a citizen, believing he could handle any troublemakers that arose. But now, introducing guns was a perilous move. They offered instantaneous, lethal force. If the wrong individual wielded this deadly power, chaos could erupt. Envy, resentment, jealousy, these base emotions could ignite into far greater problems. Because of these risks, Jae-hyun decreed that only the most trustworthy, with the highest loyalty, would be permitted to wield firearms. He knew instantly who the first recipient should be. Meanwhile, Dong-hyun's party had finished off the goblins. Suddenly, to Byung-ho's utter astonishment, a gun, encased in a mysterious box, materialized before him. With profound reverence, Byung-ho accepted it without a word, silently thanking his god, Jae-hyun. At this juncture, Byung-ho's devotion to Jae-hyun was so absolute, he might have considered marrying him. Afterward, Dongjin's squad pressed on, with Yejin's rat as their guide. They arrived at a door. Dong-yeon opened it, and within, they discovered a huddled group of terrified survivors. Elsewhere, Jae-hyun was taking a calm stroll outside with Yejin, savoring this rare moment of tranquility. Suddenly, a new system notification. alerted him that an unknown entity was attempting to enter. Shortly after, a second message appeared, signaling that someone eligible for citizenship was close by. The system queried if he wished to grant access. Without a moment's hesitation, Jaehyun approved their citizenship. Her sister, Dabin, began to tease her, saying she smelled wonderful and asked if she'd taken a shower. Yejin laughed, explaining she now had access to hot water. From a distance, Jaehyun observed their joyous reunion. After a moment, he called out to Yejin, stating that apartment 2701 was now hers, but might become cramped if she intended to house over 30 people there. Noticing her worry, Jaehyun said he would grant her 3 additional rooms because she had more than earned it. Overjoyed, Yejin thanked him, vowing to serve him tirelessly. Jaehyun received another system notification. Yejin's trust and loyalty levels had risen again. On Dalre, Lee Sung-joon and Han Young-soo's trust and loyalty also saw an increase. While observing the interface, Jaehyun recalled that he had leveled up earlier and had neglected to check his rewards. He saw a new option, the Guardian Beast Management System. He opened it and nearly passed out. To unlock it, the system demanded a staggering 1 billion won. As he reeled from the exorbitant cost, a gentle voice cut in, asking if he had a spare moment to talk. Jaehyun bid her to enter. It was Hae-rin, the youngest of Dong Hyun's party, who appeared deeply troubled. She stated she had something vital to say. Jaehyun invited her to have a seat. Hae-rin apologized, her voice quivering, and asked to be dismissed from the group. She felt utterly worthless, believing no one would even notice her absence. Jaehyun prompted her to speak freely, and she broke down completely, admitting that the monsters were beyond terrifying, and she felt completely useless because she couldn't deploy her poison mist around her allies. Jaehyun had anticipated this very conversation. He knew that her poison mist was a double-edged sword if misused. He reassured her, saying her timing was absolutely perfect, as he needed a trustworthy person to assist him. Dabin, who was tending to the wounded, was on the verge of collapse and had requested aid. Jaehyun stated he required someone honest and kind-hearted, and she was the perfect candidate for the role. He told her that no one is useless so long as they keep striving. He reminded her that her poison mist was a unique power, and that one day it would surely shine. If she was unable to fight on the front lines, she could provide aid from within. Jaehyun bowed his head deeply. Hae-rin was stunned, deeply moved, and she smiled. The system showed that her loyalty had soared to a perfect 100. She wiped away her tears and swore to do her absolute best. Jaehyun smiled, vowing to continue to rely upon her. Moments later, Jaehyun considered unlocking the new feature. An interface appeared, showing it required an unbelievable 1 billion won. He decided the risk was worth it and clicked yes. A golden magic circle appeared, and at its center, a golden crystalline egg began to fracture. The blinding luminescence forced him to shut his eyes. When the light subsided, he saw a small, adorable black chick. He activated the Supreme Recluse's eyes and saw it was a 3-legged divine raven, level 1. It pulsed with the energy of the sun, but was just a hatchling and needed protection and sunlight to mature. Jaehyun christened it Little Blackie. The bird flapped its tiny wings with glee, but kept chirping, and Jaehyun realized the creature was famished. He offered it a bag of chips, which the bird devoured with gusto. Afterward, Blackie promptly fell asleep like a lazy house cat. At that very moment, Jaehyun received a system alert. Blackie's level had increased, and the solar generator's output had surged by 100%. Jaehyun recalled that each generator produced about 80,000 to 100,000, one each day. Now, with Blackie's blessing, the yearly profit soared to 90 million won. He resolved to install solar generators in all 10 of his new buildings. The 24-hour countdown commenced. Satisfied, Jaehyun proceeded to apartment 3001. The moment Fatty opened the door, Jaehyun greeted him and stated he wished to entrust him with a grave responsibility: the management of his personal funds. Fatty froze. Flashback. Jaehyun had been contemplating his tax collection power. If he entrusted the funds to another, he could profit, as the skill generated a 10% return each month. He selected Fatty due to his exceptionally high trust and loyalty. Back in the present, Fatty was in complete shock. Choi Hyun-jun, Fatty, possessed a trust of 89 and a loyalty of 98. His special ability was Gorilla Strength. Jaehyun felt utterly confident in his decision. Without another word, Jaehyun transferred 1 billion won directly to Fatty's wallet. The system confirmed the transaction. The gambit cost 100,030,000 won, including the 10% transfer fee, but will be well worth it. Fatty's trust climbed, while his loyalty reached a perfect 100. Since Fatty was already a vassal, the The maximum number of vassals Jae-hyun could command also increased. Fatty asked if he should safeguard the funds without spending any. Jae-hyun, seeing Fatty's unwavering loyalty, reassured him, saying he could use a small amount if the need arose. Elated, Fatty thanked him. Shortly after, Dabin arrived and asked Jae-hyun if she could select anyone for her new squad. Jae-hyun agreed, saying she could even recruit Yoo-rin. And since Dabin would be the new team's captain, Jae-hyun declared she would receive double compensation. The news delighted Dabin, and her loyalty surged instantly. She thanked him and departed to find Yoo-rin. Once all were gone, Jae-hyun took a deep, steadying breath. It was finally time for a solemn and difficult discussion. Resolute, he headed for apartment 2109, where Hadding Jeon's team was. Upon his arrival, Jae-hyun assembled the party and described the perilous threat. At Seomyeon Station, an unbelievably powerful beast awaited them. The surrounding area was deceptively safe. There were no monsters on the streets or in the subway tunnels. Near Seomyeon Station, between Bayongnaegal and Bayongil stations, the monster population there was sparse. An opportunity Jae-hyun knew they must exploit. As he addressed the team, Jae-hyun recalled Yoo-rin's breakdown. That moment had deeply affected him. A stark reminder that these people were risking their very lives for him. It was a crushing weight upon his shoulders. Thanks to Eugene, they had identified the menace at Seomyeon Station far in advance. If they had discovered it too late, the outcome would have been a massacre. Detecting the threat early granted them a crucial advantage. Jaehan understood the brutal truth. The world was savage, and anyone could perish. He wanted to shield those he cared for. With all these thoughts swirling, he informed the group that the next day, they would advance to Jigaoki Station. Later, in his room, the system screen appeared. The solar generator's output had surged by another 100%. Additionally, Blackie had leveled up once more and unlocked the power of the sun and elemental magic. As Blackie's master, Jae-hyun inherited this new power, elemental magic. This was a massive boon. Curious, he lifted a finger, and a tiny flame flickered to life. The sensation was bizarre, yet strangely familiar. Later, in a secluded chamber, he envisioned a roaring inferno. He extended his hand and focused his energy, but only a pathetic little flame materialized. Jae-hyun was underwhelmed, but curiosity soon replaced his disappointment. He recalled the special gas generated by his ability. If he were to combine that gas with his flame, the results could be truly cataclysmic. For now, it was just an infant flame, but one day, it could become a raging conflagration, a truly monstrous power. Feeling a thrill, Jae-hyun concluded the test and returned to his apartment. While he was eating, another notification appeared, informing him that 2 more solar generators had been completed. Jae-hyun smirked, thinking of little Blackie, who had already leveled up 3 times. Thanks to her blessing, the generators were now 8 times more efficient, and the excess energy converted into pure profit. More power meant more freedom. Things were becoming truly spectacular. While he was finishing his meal, Eugene entered and thanked him for allowing her to rest. Jae-hyun reassured her, stating she deserved the respite, as her skills were top tier. Without pause, he declared he would need her assistance once more. Dongin's team was currently waiting at Seomyeon Station, and he wanted her to be their guide. Yejin agreed, saying her rats were already scouting the subway tunnels. She reported they could reach Choyong Station without incident. Eugene's expression grew grim. She warned him that the true danger began at Busan Station and suggested he witness it for himself. Without delay, Eugene sat down and unleashed her power, and Jae-hyun activated his Eyes of the Absolute, linking his vision to the rats. Nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The path ahead was a scene of utter devastation. Mountains of debris blocked the way, and the tracks were completely submerged. It was impossible to move forward. Yejin explained that one of her rats had ventured deeper and discovered nothing but total ruin. No structures remained intact. What could have caused this? Were his parents still even alive? While sharing the vision, Jae-hyun spotted something deeply unsettling. His eyes widened. It was a single, colossal footprint, large enough to topple entire buildings. Everything fell into place. It wasn't an earthquake. Something massive had passed through this place. Was that you, Colossal Titan? Was Eren Yeager somewhere nearby? Suddenly, a loud, deafening crash echoed nearby. The very walls began to shudder. Each footstep grew more intense. Ji-hyun wondered if the monster was closing in. The tremors persisted, and he began to fear that the building itself might collapse. Another tremor shook the structure violently, and he asked Yejin if she was all right. She confirmed she was, but wondered what was causing it. Suddenly, a frantic voice called to him from the elevator. Jae-hyun and Yejin rushed out and saw Fatty. In a panic, Jae-hyun demanded to know what was happening, but Fatty just motioned for them to come with him. Jae-hyun, Yejin, and the others hurried after him. The sense of impending doom grew stronger. Inside Fatty's room, a 60-meter titan was demolishing skyscrapers with ease. It was a giant cyclops with a single crimson eye. Jae-hyun muttered that his premonitions always came true. He watched, helpless, as the cyclops laid waste to buildings and advanced. Fatty and the others were panicking. Even Jae-hyun felt a true, primal fear. Could he possibly defeat a titan? Could he protect everyone? He was on the brink of an emotional breakdown. When Yeonju stepped forward, her face a mask of determination. She wanted to fight to avenge the death of her son. Jae-hyun saw the fire and resolve in her eyes. He believed in her unwavering courage. The system interface materialized, issuing a new quest. Vanquish the Cyclops within 24 hours. The reward, 1 day of resurrection. For Yeonju's fallen son. The penalty, a day of unimaginable pain. Jae-hyun wasted no time and began the briefing. He assigned the combat teams. Team 1, Yeonju, Donghan, Daeyoung, and Daeoksu. Team 2, Gaeyoung and Byung-go. Kim Jiyeon. Team 3, Jae-hyun and Yijin. He would defend the perimeter while the others moved to their positions. He reminded them all that he was counting on their strength and courage. Everyone moved to follow their orders. Afterward, Hiren reported that the residents with prior military training had assembled at the main gate, while the others were evacuated to the basement shelter. Jae-hyun thanked her and told her to also take shelter in the basement. However, Hae-rin stood her ground, although she was paralyzed with fear. She wanted to help. Jae-hyun saw her terror, but he also saw her courage. She admitted she was scared, but she wanted to be of use. Hearing this, Jae-hyun smiled and instructed her, along with Yejin, to head to the main gate. He found a number of fighters to be small. Many had chosen to cower instead of fight. As he processed this, a familiar person approached. It was the red jacket guy. He asked Jae-hyun what their orders were. Jae-hyun asked about Baek, Sung-yab, and the twin brothers. The red jacket guy averted his gaze, silent. His silence screamed the truth. Jae-hyun realized that Baek Sang-yab and the twins had deserted, hiding in the basement. A wave of disgust washed over him. He knew that hundreds of people had chosen to ignore the threat and prioritize their own selfish survival. To Jae-hyun, those people had chosen comfort over conviction. He saw them as cowards who had abandoned their duty, leaving the burden of this battle to the truly brave. Jae-hyun would never forget the 101 brave souls who had answered his call. These people were not fools. They didn't show up because they failed to grasp the danger. They showed up because they knew the truth. If no one stood and fought, everyone would surely perish. They chose to defend themselves and their loved ones. Jae-hyun recalled a saying he once heard. Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. This resonated with him deeply. In this savage new world, those who acted despite their terror were the ones who guaranteed everyone else's survival. And right there, standing before him, were 101 truly brave people. In silence, Jae-hyun offered his thanks to each and every one of them, resolved to honor their bravery. He opened the system, and suddenly, firearms and infinite ammo rained down from the heavens, stunning everyone. At first, the group was hesitant, but upon gripping the cold, real steel, feeling its weight, a new, desperate hope was ignited. They might actually have a chance against that monster. The giant Cyclops was terrifying and let out a roar, making the nearby buildings tremble and shake. Dong Jin hid, holding a spear. He took aim at the Cyclops' leg and launched the spear with all his might. The weapon embedded itself deep within the monster's flesh. The creature roared in agony. Enraged, the Cyclops sought the source of the spear, its gaze landing on Dong Jin, who froze in place. The monster began to advance, dragging its mangled leg. At that moment, the mother bear, in her full beast form, attacked the beast from behind. She dug her massive claws into the Cyclops' already injured leg, inflicting even more grievous damage. The Cyclops roared and fell to its knees. But Yeonju's assault was not enough. It rose, took a giant stomp, and sent her flying far away. In a single brutal blow, it tossed her like a rag doll, and she slammed into a distant building. It looked like the end. The Cyclops bent down, ready to deliver the killing blow. But before it could finish her, a loud voice boomed through a megaphone. It was Deoxys, calling the Cyclops an idiot and saying its brains were in its eye. Amazingly, the Cyclops understood the taunt and glared at Deoxys. Its massive "I saw the spear" still lodged in its leg, and it realized that Dyaxu was the bastard who'd thrown it. The Cyclops became utterly enraged and began to march toward Dyaxu, hell-bent on crushing him. Dyaxu was terrified. He knew the monster was coming to kill him. He turned and fled for his life like a rat from a cat. From a distance, Jihyun saw that his plan was working. The Cyclops was heading straight for their trap. Jaehyun gave the signal for everyone to prepare themselves. Meanwhile, Dyaxu sprinted to the barrier. The Cyclops pursued him with slow but thunderous steps. Yaksu collapsed, utterly exhausted, inside the barrier, and the Cyclops reached its edge. Jaehyun gave another signal, and a black raven flew towards the Cyclops, pecking and clawing viciously at its eye. Annoyed and in agony, the Cyclops squeezed its eye shut. Taking advantage of this crucial distraction, Gaon, already in position, loosed an arrow. The Cyclops tried to block it, but the arrow pierced through its hand and struck its closed eye. A roar of pure agony echoed amidst the chaos. Byungo teleported high above the monster and threw several rats into the Cyclops' gaping mouth. The plan was proceeding flawlessly. As the next phase commenced, Jaehyun summoned an explosive gas deep inside the Cyclops' body, which began to bloat and swell. He raised his hands and unleashed his sunfire magic. A colossal explosion erupted from within the Cyclops, and black smoke blotted out the entire sky. When the smoke finally cleared, the Cyclops form was still standing. It was horrifically burned and seemingly lifeless, slumped against the barrier. Everyone was in shock. They thought they were surely going to die, but the Cyclops appeared to be vanquished. But Jaehyun knew something was terribly wrong. The Cyclops wasn't dead. The system hadn't confirmed the kill. He ordered everyone to remain on high alert. Everything had gone perfectly. But suddenly, Fatty called out to Jaehyun, his voice trembling, telling him to turn around. Jaehyun turned cautiously, and to his absolute shock and horror, he saw the Cyclops' single red eye staring directly at him. That murderous glare looked as if it wanted to devour him whole. Jaehyun panicked, unable to comprehend how the monster had survived. But before he could even process what was happening, the Cyclops raised its massive hands and slammed them into the barrier. The barrier miraculously held the blow. But Jaehyun grew frantic, doubting it could survive another assault. He activated the invisible hand to shield the citizens. The Cyclops struck once more, and the barrier shuddered but somehow held firm. However, the adjacent buildings were not so fortunate. The shockwaves were tearing them apart. With 2 or 3 more hits, the entire complex would be reduced to rubble. In that moment, Dongjun sprang into action, unleashing a veritable storm of deadly spears. Yeonju and the others joined the desperate attack, but it was not enough. Each blow only seemed to enrage the monster further, when it seemed truly impossible to defeat the beast. The solar generators had reached their absolute peak capacity, and a request came in to harness that very energy. The plea came directly for Blackie. Jaehyun was stunned. Was it attempting to intervene? Jaehyun recalled that Blackie's essence was tied to solar power. With his back against the wall, he approved the request. High in the sky, a blazing yellow sphere, a literal miniature sun, began to coalesce, devouring every ounce of power from the solar arrays. The searing heat was so great it threatened to warp the buildings. Jaehyun then realized with horror that 300 million won had been incinerated for a single strike. The power converged in his room, and from it, a new form emerged. In a blinding flash, Blackie had now evolved. She now possessed 3 glowing eyes, massive plumage, looking like a damn majestic black phoenix. She opened her powerful beak, harnessed the solar might, and unleashed a ruinous ray upon the Cyclops. The assault bored a gaping hole in the Cyclops' chest, but the beast somehow refused to fall. Seizing the critical moment, Yeonju morphed into her savage mother bear form, soared into the air, and delivered the final blow, annihilating the level 51 Cyclops. Instantly, Jaehyun was flooded with immense EXP and 31 billion won. He leveled up, a searing pain exploding in his head. His domain surged outward, engulfing even more buildings. On top of that, Jaehyun was granted another 10 billion won solely for construction. In agony, he collapsed to his knees. Blackie fluttered to him, nudging her beak against his nose, as if declaring she was the real victor. Jaehyun lauded her incredible work, but still couldn't fathom that one attack cost 300 million won. Blackie offered no response, but Jaehyun was ecstatic after all. He'd earned 31 billion won, and every soul was safe. It was a truly flawless victory. Blackie felling that colossal titan with a single strike was the most astounding feat he had ever witnessed. Smiling, Jaehyun stroked Blackie for her unbelievable heroism. Both he and Blackie whipped their heads toward the source of the noise. It was Yeonju, the mighty Werbear warrior. And in that instant, Jaehyun had a sudden, profound realization. For just one moment, the gentle chime from the system interface transformed into something else entirely. It was a sound Yeonju had been praying to hear for a very, very long time. A short while before this moment, inside a derelict, abandoned structure, a man was quietly channeling his unique power, filling a small flask with precious water. The people surrounding him were immensely grateful, simply overjoyed to finally have clean water to consume. The man with the ability stood there, lost in his thoughts, deeply troubled because their food supplies were completely depleted. He had a long queue of people awaiting the life-giving water he could manifest, but it was painfully obvious their sustenance was nearly gone. He understood this was the absolute end of what they could do. With the meager provisions they possessed, a profound sense of dread began to fester inside him, because it seemed inevitable they would have to flee this place, a refuge that had been their sanctuary until this moment. Just then, he and all the others inside felt the entire building shudder. Violently, as anyone would, he immediately questioned if it was an earthquake. Right after, another man came sprinting inside, shouting and begging them all to see what was happening outside. When the man uttered the single word, monster, the man with the water power froze solid for a long second. Without a moment's hesitation, he began to sprint, bounding up the staircase to reach the roof and see for himself. Once he reached the summit, he was left utterly breathless by the sight. The colossal Cyclops was still on its feet, radiating a palpable aura of immense power and rage, while the white-haired man quaked beside him, anxiously demanding to know what they should do. The purple-haired one, Jaehyun, was already formulating a plan. He told the other man to go and shelter everyone in the basement to ensure their safety. Overwhelmed and desperate, Jaehyun ran his hands through his hair, completely frustrated, trying to conjure some kind of strategy. But it was painfully obvious that fighting the Cyclops was utterly impossible. He tried to calm the other man, explaining there was nothing they could do against a creature of that scale. In the background, completely unbeknownst to them, the blinding light of Blackie's impending attack had already begun to take shape. The men could only converse in hushed, terrified whispers, saying all they could do was pray the beast wouldn't notice them. And in the background, once more, the Cyclops was being utterly annihilated. It caught them completely off guard. They had no clue what had just transpired, what kind of apocalyptic power had just been unleashed. But when Hyuk saw it, when he truly comprehended what lay before him, he knew in that very instant this power came from an awakened being, that someone existed on a plane far, far beyond his own. Hyuk called out to the silver-haired man, addressing him as Hyun, and commanded him to assemble their people. Hyun, completely dumbfounded, asked if he had completely lost his mind. Was he seriously suggesting they head towards that chaos? But Hyuk was absolutely certain. Even though he did not know who this awakened person was, he knew exactly what they had to do. If they truly wished to survive in this hellish, unforgiving world, they had to align themselves with the one who held the power to vanquish a creature like that Cyclops. As they began their journey toward Jaehyun's location, the people silently hoped and prayed that whoever they were about to encounter would be a benevolent soul, because they truly had no other option. Their very fate was now left entirely up to chance. They eventually came upon the apartment complex and immediately knew this had to be the sanctuary. After all, the buildings were still perfectly intact, completely unscathed in a world that had been utterly ravaged. John, leading the way for the group, said with disbelief, "How can these buildings be standing in a world that's been torn asunder?" But then he suddenly collided with some kind of invisible barrier. Right after that, a message from the system materialized before them, saying, "Entry denied." A second message immediately followed, asking if they would like to become citizens. They accepted, and the system swiftly responded, showing they had been successfully inducted into citizenship. But with their newfound status came a primary directive. They were instructed to report to Jaehyun's apartment on the 30th floor. When they arrived, Jaehyun was already awaiting their arrival. Bizarrely, he was already addressing them by their names, though they had never once met before. Jaehyun introduced himself with an unnerving calm, stating his own name. In that very instant, Hyuk felt it deep in his core, a profound certainty that this man was the very one who had brought the giant Cyclops to its knees. And now that he was standing face to face with him, His instincts were screaming louder than they ever had before. Without a single moment's hesitation, Hyuk reached out, took Jae-hyun's hand, and introduced himself with sincerity, asking Jae-hyun to please take care of them. He knew in his heart that this was an opportunity he could not let slip away. Elsewhere, in a quiet and serene setting, Yeonju, the were-bear, was serving a piping hot meal. This time, a radiant and pure joy could be seen in her eyes, as she happily called out the name Siwoo. Siwoo was her little boy, her cherished child, who was eating with glee, and she lovingly asked him if the meal tasted good. With a massive grin, he replied that it was absolutely scrumptious. The small boy then turned to his mother with pure curiosity, and asked whose birthday it was, since they were having seaweed soup, a dish traditionally served on birthdays. She responded with a warm and loving embrace, holding him close while he told her how much he loved the food. At that very moment, someone opened the door. It was Jae-hyun. Seeing him, the little boy gleefully called him Wizard. Uncle. Yeonju asked Jae-hyun if everything went well with the new arrivals, and he confirmed that it had. He had already provided them with food and a place to shelter. Then, Jae-hyun offered an apology for something, and Yeonju, confused, asked why he was saying he was sorry. He explained that the newcomers would not be able to leave the residence, and that he hadn't realized that would be a stipulation. But Yeonju didn't seem troubled by this in the slightest. She calmly replied that just being there together like this, with her precious boy, was more than she could have ever asked for. Holding her son even closer, she stated with sincerity that she was truly happy now. Right after that, the system displayed a notification stating her loyalty had seen a massive increase, officially designating her as a true retainer. But even if the system had remained silent, Jae-hyun could already perceive from her expression, her voice, and her gentle demeanor that her heart was now full. He could feel Yeonju's emotions clearly, without needing any confirmation. More time slipped by, and the mother and son continued to cherish their time together now, watching television side by side, smiling and laughing. And during that simple, tranquil moment, Jae-hyun found himself reflecting deeply upon his own family, about how much time had passed since he had last seen them. He wondered how they were faring, if they were eating well, or if they had fallen ill. He closed his eyes and braced for the worst, thinking something awful might have befallen them in this chaotic new world. Just then, Blackie appeared, making a little bit of noise. The small creature began to play and frolic with the were-bear and her son. Watching them all together in that moment, a quiet realization settled over Jae-hyun. There was no need to be hasty. It was just a single day, one peaceful, ordinary day, and he understood how hard Yeonju had fought for this day to finally come to pass. At the same time, he also considered how Yi Jin's rats were at that very moment, making their way towards his family's home. Once the rats arrived, he would be able to provide whatever his family required. So today, gazing upon the mother and child, smiling and content, Jae-hyun made a choice. He would focus solely on caring for them, because this was the moment when Yeonju's one and only wish was finally brilliantly shining. Then, Jae-hyun suggested they take the master bedroom, but with her child still held tight in a loving embrace. Yeonju gently declined, saying they could stay in another room instead. Even so, Jae-hyun insisted they occupy the master bedroom, pointing out that it was the warmest and most comfortable place for the two of them. With a kind and reassuring smile, he added that it was only right. Without pause, Yeonju lovingly stroked her son's hair, and together, they thanked Jae-hyun for his profound kindness and compassion. Soon after, they headed to the room, wished him a good night, and the little boy waved sweetly at Jae-hyun before they went inside. Jae-hyun watched them depart with a deep sense of peace in his heart, a faint, knowing smile on his face. The lights in the apartment slowly went out, and a gentle lullaby began to echo softly through the home, wafting from the bedroom as the child, still awake, listened in silence. Meanwhile, in the living room, Jae-hyun lay on the sofa, listening to the sweet lullaby that continued for a long time, sung so tenderly by Yeonju's voice. It had been a very long time since he'd heard a melody like that, yet just by listening to it, his body began to relax, and his eyes gently drifted shut, much like a child falling asleep in its mother's embrace. A new day dawned, quiet and peaceful. Jae-hyun began the morning, enjoying a breakfast lovingly prepared by Yeonju and her little boy. Afterward, they all got comfortable in the living room to watch the boy's favorite animated shows. The child was absolutely ecstatic, laughing at every single scene as if he were watching it for the very first time. Soon, Jaewa began chasing after Blackie, who had been peacefully basking in the sunlight, until he was abruptly disturbed, which clearly did not please the creature. Later, after exploring all the brand new toys they had, Ji-hyun, her son, and Jaehyun all lay down on the floor together for a short nap. Between vibrant drawings and joyous laughter, every single second of the day was filled with pure joy and true happiness. But time, as always, waits for no one. With Blackie perched on his shoulder, Jaehyun wept in silence, overcome by the quiet sorrow of only being able to grant a single day of life to Yeonju's precious son. Soon after, Yeonju knelt down on the floor, saying her final goodbyes while clutching her son tightly, pouring all her love and strength into that one last hug. Still too young to truly grasp the gravity of the moment, the boy innocently asked if she was crying. With tears already cascading down her face, she fought to keep her voice from breaking, and calmly whispered that she wasn't. But with his tiny hand resting gently upon her cheek, he could feel the tears so very softly. Siwoo began to wipe away her tears, doing his best to comfort her and asking her kindly not to cry. Yeonju held him tightly once more, and in a trembling voice, he finally confessed that she was terrified, afraid of this world, because a world without him was far too horrifying. Then, with the pure innocence of a child, the boy simply called her mom, and promised with absolute certainty that he was right there beside her. Those words, so pure and so real, made Yeonju break down even further, tears flowing from the immense weight of her sorrow and her despair. Even as Sihwa continued trying to reassure her, Jaehyun remained in tears. He took a single step back, slowly pulling away from her embrace, looking her directly in her eyes. He firmly promised that he would always be right by her side. Overwhelmed by her sadness, she called his name in a choked voice. But without pausing, he continued walking towards the fading sun. While behind him, she shakily called out that she still had so much she wanted to do for him. He suddenly stopped. He turned around slowly, and with a gentle smile full of warmth and pure joy, he said that he loved her, just as his body began to dissolve into the light. At that exact moment, hearing those very words, she froze, still kneeling on the floor. Her body began to tremble, and the immense pain made it nearly impossible for her to respond. But as all mothers do, even amidst unbelievable agony, she smiled through her tears and managed to whisper back a quiet, "I love you." And with those final, precious words, Siwoo bid farewell with a peaceful smile. In the blink of an eye, his body vanished completely, and Yeonju's hand, overcome by the unbearable pain of this final farewell, fell limply to the floor, while Jaehyun watched her in silence, deeply concerned and utterly heartbroken by her side. Soon after, she attempted to stand, but the pain she felt was so utterly overwhelming, so completely crushing, that her body simply refused to let her rise. Moved by the scene, Jaehyun could only think that hope is like a delicate flower that chooses to bloom right in the very heart of despair. With his eyes shut tightly, he came to a painful understanding. Those who dare to cling to hope must be ready to face the deepest sorrow, no matter how cruel. And he offered his hand to her and gently urged Yeonju not to lose herself in her anguish, promising her that this moment was not the end. At that, Yeonju lifted her head, looked at Jaehyun, and in a hesitant, quivering voice, she asked if that was really true, if this wasn't truly the end. With absolute conviction, Jaehyun replied that if there was even the slightest possibility, he would bring her son back again and again, as many times as it took. His words ignited a new spark of hope, and Yeonju felt a renewed sense of strength. At that very moment, the system showed a message. Hanju's trust level had achieved a perfect 100%, and she had attained primordial vitality. The scene then cuts to the red-haired man, who was bellowing with uncontrollable rage. The twins, who had been overhearing everything, became visibly agitated when they learned that the standard spear, the orc spear, and all the currency the red-haired man had diligently saved had vanished in a thin air, leaving him utterly baffled and unsure of what to do. The red-haired man, clearly incensed, demanded to know about his brother's items. His brother explained that when he had come to, every single one of his possessions had disappeared without a trace. The other twin then interjected that many others had also lost their belongings. He pointed out that there was a clear pattern. Everyone who had lost their possessions had not been present when the summons had occurred, for those who had completed their military service. Then one of the twins turned and stated they should have returned to that place much sooner. Suddenly, and without any warning, he was seized by the collar of his shirt and violently pulled. The red-haired man, seething with fury, demanded to know if the twin was trying to shift all the blame onto him. The twin quickly clarified that he had completely misunderstood. Still, the red-haired man remained absolutely furious, raising his voice even higher. as he yelled that they had all agreed from the very start that obeying Jae-hyun's orders was a foolish endeavor. Facing this mounting tension, the brother, already on edge and losing his composure, conceded that yes, Jae-hyun's plan had been a fool's errand from the beginning. Hearing this, the red-haired man finally released his brother's shirt. It was only then that the realization hit him. He might have been exiled because of his own damn actions. Now tense and deeply unnerved, he recalled there had only been one similar incident before. He began to think about the tale of a man who had attempted to get involved with an underage girl. That man was discovered and immediately banished, only to be discovered dead in the middle of the street shortly after. As he continued to mull over the situation, he came to the grim conclusion that even now, with that giant and all the ensuing chaos, the survivors still congregated in abandoned apartments. So, it was highly probable that there were more than enough people who would be more than happy to ensure he was the next to be exiled. He was utterly consumed by the hatred he felt for the predicament he now found himself in. The image of the man in the red jacket appeared vividly in his mind. He called him a bastard, and he imagined just how smug that bastard must have been when he was given a weapon. Soon after, the red-haired man scratched at his head, restless and completely agitated, trying to comprehend how everything had spiraled so far out of control. Elsewhere, Jae-hyun observed everything, the tension brewing around the red-haired man, and said to himself that this was merely the beginning of the retribution he had meticulously orchestrated for him. Back with the red-haired man, a system window abruptly materialized behind him, displaying a new directive which took him completely by surprise. Startled and in disbelief, he immediately spun around to see the message for himself. The system window revealed a new mission. Hunt 20 goblins within 24 hours. If they were successful, the prize would be a small amount of experience. But if they were to fail, they would endure 1 minute of extreme, unbearable agony. Now, returning to Yeonju's most recent, impressive acquisition, the terrifying primordial vitality. It's a rare and highly coveted power that Jae-hyun now also possesses. It's known for making one's regeneration incredibly swift, always in direct proportion to how severe the injuries are. Jae-hyun could hardly comprehend what he had just witnessed. Not for a single second had he fathomed that after reaching 100 trust points, Yeonju would gain that specific ability. Still deep in contemplation, Jae-hyun soon realized that for now, this ability wouldn't be particularly useful. With his gaze fixed on the system window, he continued to follow his own train of thought. After all, he would not be the one in combat. Even if he were to venture outside the building, the odds of him sustaining a serious injury were practically zero. Even so, the fact that such a powerful skill was the prize for achieving 100 trust points is certainly worth noting. His thoughts then turned to Byung-ho, who was also nearing that very same 100-point threshold. The idea of what might happen next began to form in his mind. If Byung-ho were to acquire an ability after hitting 100 trust points, and if Jae-hyun also inherited that very same skill, one that would permit him to instantly teleport to any location he could see, then his possibilities would expand exponentially. Thinking even further, Jae-hyun began to envision a future where this teleportation power could be utilized with the absolute one's eye, along with the aid of an activated advanced base. Just then, the system displayed a message regarding the advanced base safe zone. When activated, it temporarily granted the authority and protection of the city, as long as a citizen of knight rank or higher was stationed inside. However, if enemies occupied it for more than 1 day, the base would be automatically annihilated. Returning to his thoughts, Jae-hyun concluded that, as long as he possessed enough mental power to handle it, he would be able to travel to this advanced base. With that in mind, Jae-hyun made a solid resolution. From this moment forward, his primary objective would be to strengthen his mental fortitude. Because of that, all his future missions will be centered on enhancing that specific attribute. At that very instant, someone called out his name and explained they required his permission to depart now, as they were feeling more stable. It was Yeonju, who stated she would personally see to bringing Jae-hyun's family back. Hearing this, Jae-hyun realized the mission should have commenced the day before, but he knew the delay was entirely his own fault. Yeonju thanked him for his precious time and his patience. She then swore she would discover a way to repay his immense kindness, without showing any discernible emotion. Jae-hyun couldn't help but feel that she had read his very mind. He made a light-hearted remark, asking if he truly seemed like the impatient type, and admitted that even though he was thankful, her words made him feel a little self-conscious. Yeonju responded gently, saying he certainly didn't seem impatient, and conceded that if she had been in his position, she likely would have acted in the very same way. With a soft smile, she confessed that in the end, everyone cherishes their own family above all else, and that she fully comprehended how precious that one day Jaehyun had given her and her son truly was. She thanked him sincerely once more for what he had done. Jaehyun smiled humbly and said he appreciated her understanding. He then instructed her to proceed to Unit 2901, where a group of people was already awaiting her arrival, promising he would rendezvous with them shortly. Yinju gave a respectful bow, and with a quiet yes, she walked towards the designated location. Sometime later, it was revealed why Jaehyun had not dispatched the group directly to Syomian Station. Because of the Cyclops' rampage, a large portion of the tracks near the station had collapsed. Not just the tracks, but the station itself had sustained catastrophic damage and was almost completely non-functional. Faced with this new reality, Jaehyun determined that new routes had to be established. To do that, it had already been 24 hours since Yi-jin had begun sending her rats to search for a viable path. Apparently, she had finally discovered a new point of entry. Jaehyun activated his absolute one's eye skill, desiring total control and awareness of the unfolding situation. At that very moment, something unexpected seized his attention. The system showed a message regarding a level 7 tamed giant rat. Immediately, a wave of shock coursed through Jaehyun's entire body as he understood what this implied. Yi-jin had evolved. Still reeling, Jaehyun wondered if this was the result of the new power Yi-jin had received after being officially designated as his retainer. In addition to this, Jaehyun noticed that something was tailing the rat, but no matter how hard he focused, he couldn't determine what it was. Suddenly, his vision picked up on something even more terrifying. A horde of zombies of varying levels. Level 9, Level 11, and Level 13 emerging right behind. A jolt of fear shot through Jihan's entire body as, through his powerful ability, he watched this horrifying scene begin to play out. Facing this threat, the rat darted forward at incredible speed, desperately trying to escape the zombies that were pursuing with a relentless determination. But in a completely shocking turn of events, the rat came to a sudden halt. It turned to face the advancing horde, and without betraying the slightest hint of fear, it growled aggressively at them, baring its teeth with a savagery that defied its small size. The zombies quickly swarmed the rat from every direction, cutting off any possible escape route. Yet, even when faced with so much peril, the rat stood its ground, refusing to retreat even a single step. From a distance, Jaehyun observed the spectacle. Realizing the rat would likely die for nothing if it remained there, he considered triggering a gas explosion to take the zombies down along with it. Nevertheless, even with the threat closing in, the rat remained laser-focused, taking an even more aggressive posture. With a sudden burst of explosive velocity, it charged forward, despite being completely encircled. The rat managed to evade every single one of the zombies' attacks, deftly weaving between them with astonishing agility. Still observing from afar, Jaehyun was thoroughly impressed by what he was witnessing. After breaking away from the zombies, the rat leaped forward and continued on. Amazingly, it emerged from the battle without a single injury and kept sprinting toward the exit. With only a short distance remaining, the rat took one final, powerful leap and shot through the opening to the outside world. However, something was already waiting for it on the other side, silently observing its approach. With its eyes locked on the rat and its sharp fangs bared, the creature let out a low, menacing growl. It was poised to strike at any moment. Instantly, the rat froze, completely paralyzed by a colossal fear in the face of the predator's menacing presence. From afar, Ji-hyun was caught completely by surprise. Clash. In a heartbeat, the level 23 land shark lunged with devastating power. With its massive maw gaping open, it snapped shut in a single brutal motion, devouring the rat whole. The scene cuts to Jaehyun, who stood there in stunned silence, deeply shaken by what he had just witnessed. He wondered what kind of horrifying creature that was. But more than that, his eyes widened in horror as he recognized the area. Nampo Station, just mere kilometers from his family's home. This realization hit him like a physical blow, making it clear that beasts as lethal as that one were likely prowling near the very sanctuary where his loved ones dwell, only amplifying the crushing anxiety in his chest. Struggling to maintain his composure, he quickly admitted to himself that he had to move faster. Time was no longer a resource he could afford to squander. The scene shifts once more, this time focusing on Dab, who was crouched on the floor, sorting through several boxes. She was clearly running on fumes, but also visibly relieved to have finally completed her task. Suddenly, someone called out her name. The person who was in charge of this operation. She turned her head and saw that it was Jae-hyun who had arrived, thanking her for all of her diligent work. With a small, weary smile, Dabin replied that she didn't consider it hard work in the slightest, especially since she was being compensated for it. She then asked what the new issue was. This time, Jae-hyun, a little uneasy, averted his gaze as he tried to collect his thoughts and determine the best way to broach the new situation with her. Immediately sensing his hesitation, Dabin became visibly on edge, now sounding tense and increasingly apprehensive. She told him to just get on with what was happening. With a calm and measured tone, Jae-hyun explained that he wanted to request Yohiren's assistance for a specific objective over the next couple of days, and that he hoped Dabin could manage things in the interim. Caught off guard by the abrupt request, Dabin forced a smile to conceal her apprehension. With a slightly unsteady voice, she asked if he was expecting her to be solely responsible for every single thing, all on her own. Jae-hyun then replied that he would only be leaving it in her hands for 2 days. She already understood this meant a great deal of work and responsibility. With a dubious expression, she asked if she would receive extra pay for the overtime hours she would undoubtedly have to work as the acting lead for those 2 days. Hearing her question, Jae-hyun gave a slight, knowing smile. Then, with a buoyant tone, he swore to pay her double for the overtime. The moment he uttered it, Dabin's face lit up with pure elation. She could hardly contain her excitement, now completely revitalized and ready to tackle whatever came next. Elsewhere, a thick green vapor released directly from the system completely enveloped Yi-yoon's entire body. The scene quickly shifts to a new location, where everyone in the group was now seated around a table. All eyes on Jae-hyun as he prepared to begin the mission brief. Jae-hyun started by explaining that due to the giant Cyclops, traversing CMH Station had become significantly more challenging. He stated it would be a pity to completely abandon the subway line. Soon after, Yi-jin interjected to explain that the segment between CMH Station and Byomangal, all the way through Deokang Station, was still completely intact. According to her, there were no monsters present along that stretch of the route, so the group could pass through it without much concern. She then placed a piece of paper on the table, which displayed the primary goal of their mission: to secure the path to Byomangal Station. The man with glasses, visibly uneasy, began to muse that the best way to navigate the current route would be to simply fly over it. Suddenly and unexpectedly, Deak-su cut in, not to offer anything of substance, but merely to praise Yi-jin on her incredible talent for drawing maps. Jae-hyun quickly sliced through the mood and steered the conversation back on course. He reiterated Yi-jin's explanation, and then indicated a specific area on the map, noting that they had to exercise extreme caution before they reached their final objective. He then informed the group that approximately 500 orcs were currently active near a large supermarket complex. Hearing this, Dongjin immediately asked if they would have to confront the orcs head-on. Yi-jin responded, clearly stating that fighting the orcs was not part of their plan. They only needed to reach Byomangal Station and utilize the subterranean subway line. She swore that she had discovered a path with no orcs at all, with only a few lower-level beasts that needed to be dispatched. Along the way, quietly, Jae-hyun recalled how much he had invested prior to this mission, ensuring almost every member in the group reached at least level 30. With only Fatty and Hirin not quite there yet, he believed that would be more than sufficient against mere goblins. Jae-hyun continued by explaining that they should reach Goryong Station without any major complications. However, he then immediately highlighted the true obstacle that lay before them: Busan Station. The moment he mentioned Busan, Deak-su began to panic, fearing there might be another colossal creature there. But Yi-jin quickly said no. Her concern wasn't about another giant, she said, but about the condition of the actual railway tracks between Goryong and Busan. She then revealed that this particular area was teeming with a massive horde of zombies, and unless someone in their group had an ability to annihilate monsters in extremely confined spaces, utilizing that route would be a serious and perilous undertaking. Everyone was left stunned by this new revelation, especially Heron. Trying to remain calm, Heron focused and slowly summoned the courage to speak. Still nervous, she called Yi-jin by name and with trembling hands stated that she thought her ability might be able to help them in this situation. Sometime later, the system showed a message stating that the 100,000 weight limit of her poisonous mist had just been met. Seeing this message, Hyen felt a deep sense of frustration, that her contribution was already at its absolute limit. She opened a nearby door where Jae-hyun and Yejin were waiting. Both of them immediately began to praise her efforts, telling her she did an exceptionally good job. Jae-hyun asked if she was feeling alright. Hyun confirmed that she was. Even though she had felt completely exhausted at the beginning, something powerful seemed to sustain her, and now she felt fine. What she didn't realize was that the strength she had felt came from Jae-hyun, who had secretly enhanced his retainer management level. Jae-hyun thought about the price of the upgrade. It had been costly, but ultimately, it was well worth it since he ended up gaining billions in return. Still uncertain, Huron then asked Jae-hyun if he was truly certain. It was alright for her not to go in person. Jae-hyun calmly reassured her, explaining that just remaining in place and producing her poisonous mist was more than enough for what the mission required. With all their preparations now complete, Jae-hyun activated his Supreme Recluse's eyes ability and officially declared the operation a go. Immediately, through his power, he saw a massive swarm of zombies, exactly where they had anticipated. Suddenly, something captured the zombies' attention, and they all turned in unison to face whatever was approaching. It was a level 3 rat, charging swiftly toward them at full tilt. The zombies were momentarily taken aback the instant they realized what, or rather who was coming. Following the plan with painstaking precision, Jae-hyun opened his inventory in the system. A thick and venomous green mist was unleashed, spreading swiftly over the horde of the undead. In perfect sync, the rat darted forward at high speed, weaving through the corpses and leaving the zombies in its wake. Heron's poisonous mist, when it is inhaled, induces paralysis by targeting muscles like the diaphragm, ultimately leading to asphyxiation. However, the targets this time were zombies, creatures that are already deceased and have no need to breathe. That's why Jae-hyun had already anticipated this very limitation and had prepared a contingency plan. He had instructed Yejin beforehand to take over when the need arose. Soon, amidst the group of undead, several rats waited with patience, ready for Yejin's command. As soon as the order was issued, one of the rats lunged towards a fallen zombie. Through the reflection in the zombie's still open eye, the system captured the exact moment the rat bared its teeth and sank them viciously into the creature. At that precise instant, a system message appeared. Level 11 zombie had been successfully hunted, along with the experience. Gained a deposit of 120,085. One was transferred directly to his digital wallet, but the momentum was abruptly shattered when Yejin called out to Jae-hyun in distress, with urgency in her voice. She told him that something seemed to be amiss with the rats. At that exact moment, the system showed a disturbing message. A rat had reached level 9. This news instantly put Jae-hyun on high alert. He quickly realized the potential danger. If that rat were to touch zombie blood, it might become infected and transform into one of them. Even more alarming was a far more terrifying possibility. Yejin herself might have been exposed to the contamination through bites or scratches during the battle. In response, Jae-hyun immediately asked if the rats were still obeying her commands. Yejin confirmed that they were, although she noted they had become noticeably more aggressive. Relieved, Jae-hyun let out a soft breath and said that everything seemed to be going smoothly, at least for the time being. Internally, he began to consider what lay ahead. If they could reach Jigaki Station safely, then maybe, just maybe, he would finally have the opportunity to reunite with his family. But just as this thought began to form in his mind, it was abruptly shattered by a system message. An unauthorized individual was attempting to enter the shelter through the main entrance. Confused and alarmed, Jae-hyun stared at the message, struggling to comprehend what was happening. Before he had a moment to act, a second message materialized. The system stated that a group of 157 people met the requirements for citizenship and asked if he wished to grant it. Relying on his gut instinct, Jae-hyun confirmed. Immediately, another system message was displayed. The total population had now reached 3,000 residents. As a result, a new ability had been unlocked, Economic Activity Subsidy. Reading this new development, Jae-hyun felt a brief moment of concern, unsure of what the consequences might be. But then, a small smile slowly formed on his lips. After all, this might actually be a very good thing. The system continued to display new information, this time announcing that salaries would now be paid to citizens, the amount dictated by their titles or positions. The wages would be paid separately from the chief's own wallet, depending only on the person's assigned role within the community. Reading this update with care, Dae-hoon realized This would be the perfect chance to grant official titles to Dabin and the entire team tasked with managing public facilities. After all, a weekly salary of 700,001 won perfectly aligned with a daily wage of 100,001 won, making the accounting simple. Tapping the system screen, he said that there was no longer any need to pay people by hand, especially since doing so before meant foregoing reduced taxes. At the rate things were going, it became obvious to him that they needed to expand the department in charge of public facilities. After all, the money given to citizens through the Economic Activity Support Fund was essentially free currency provided by the system. It wasn't a small sum either. Even the 100,001 won paid to each employee was substantial. Doing a quick calculation in his mind, if there were 300 workers on the payroll, that was already 30 million and won per day. And if all positions, from basic laborers to general managers, were filled, the total amount paid daily could easily surpass 50 million won. Thinking ahead, Jae-hyun envisioned that as this currency circulated, the total income he received from his tax collection ability would continue to grow. On the other hand, the citizens would inevitably spend that money in his own store, effectively funneling it right back to him. This made him realize that granting titles to as many citizens as possible was likely the most profitable long-term strategy yet. He still wasn't completely sure which titles would be the most suitable, aside from facility management. Soon, another idea sparked in his mind. Positions related to maintenance, cleaning, and security would be practical places to begin. So, before doing anything else, he went ahead and appointed Dabin as the general manager. He recalled that she had already accepted Fatty and Huron as members of her team, although he couldn't quite remember who the other members were. Just then, something caught Jae-hyun's attention. It was the system once more, this time displaying a message that Dabin had reached 100 loyalty points, officially designating her as a retainer. At that moment, Jae-hyun realized something critical. Once a citizen achieves 100 loyalty, they automatically become a retainer. And now, he began to wonder, do all retainers gain a new skill at that exact point? Curious, Jae-hyun got ready to check and see what new skill Dabin might have acquired. But just as he was about to click on the system, he was interrupted by an unexpected sight. Huron, completely relaxed, was fast asleep on the sofa, even drooling a little. Watching the scene, Eugene looked a little unsure and asked if they should awaken her. Jae-hyun replied that they should let her rest. She had performed her duty and must be completely drained. Smiling faintly, he admitted to himself that even though she tried to appear fine, she likely endured something difficult and pushed herself right to the very brink. If anyone deserved a break, it was her. Jae-hyun activated his invisible hand ability and gently lifted her, carrying her with care to a bed in one of the rooms so she could sleep more soundly. Returning to the living room, the two of them spoke in hushed tones, agreeing that Hyun was likely having a tough time. Jae-hyun then turned to Eugene and asked how she herself was faring. Eugene responded calmly that nothing was difficult for her, that she was doing perfectly fine, especially now that they had reached the tracks near the station. Jaehan nodded in understanding and told her to keep up the good work. She smiled and told him to leave everything to her. However, at that exact moment, her expression shifted ever so slightly. Something made her falter. Jaehan immediately noticed and asked if something was amiss. She stammered for a moment and replied that all of a sudden, the connection wasn't working anymore. Jae-hyun, caught off guard, asked what she meant, and she told him to wait just a second. Closing her eyes, she attempted to reconnect with the link, but apparently it was of no use. She then explained that it was likely the distance. It seemed to be just too far. This time, Jae-hyun asked whether the link had been working properly before. She said that it was possible to go a little beyond the maximum range if the link was already established beforehand. However, the link's reach was now only as far as the central station. She then turned to him and asked what they were supposed to do now. Without an immediate answer, Jae-hyun fell deep into thought. He realized that something always seemed to go wrong. At a critical juncture, just beyond the station was the house, where his family was supposed to be. He had been banking on using one of Eugene's rats to scout the house before making a move. Clenching his fist tightly, Jae-hyun muttered that this was a complication. Still, he asked Eugene to try to re-establish the link from a central station in any way she could. She agreed, saying she would give it her absolute best shot. Closing her eyes once more, she began to focus her powers to restore the connection, with a vision of zombie rats moving through the station. Still in his supreme recluse's eyes, Jae-hyun reminded himself that they had to try every possible option, and until then, all he could do was hope with all his heart that his family was still safe. The system now displayed the current locations of everyone in the mission. Yijin's rats were moving ahead to scout out the path, while Dangyun's group stayed further behind, following at a much safer distance. The scene then shifts to the station, where Dangyun's group had just arrived. Everyone stood frozen, completely overwhelmed by what they saw. The entire area was a scene of utter devastation. All the surrounding structures had been reduced to rubble, and huge footprints, much larger than humans, were deeply embedded into the ground all over the place. John, the man with glasses, stared at the destruction in disbelief, and finally muttered that the sight was incredible. The archer, noticing he was distracted and unfocused, told him to begin scouting the area. Immediately following her command, John ordered his raven, named Blackie, to begin flying above the area. After some time watching through the raven's eyes, he reported that there didn't appear to be any monsters nearby. Dioxu then spoke up, stating that the station itself also seemed to be free of any goblins, and that because of the massive rock slide that had occurred earlier, they should be able to move through the area without much difficulty. John agreed and commented that it was probably because no sane person or creature would dare venture near a place with so much devastation. With a hint of worry in her voice, the healer mentioned that night was falling fast and that they should find somewhere safe to stay until the morning. The archer quickly reassured her, explaining that based on how goblins typically act, nighttime was actually the safest time, since goblins tend to hide or go to sleep once it gets dark. At this point, Dang Yun looked deep in thought. After a moment of silence, he spoke, saying that they should continue moving. If anything truly dangerous occurred, there was a good chance Jaehyun would summon them back right away. Suddenly, one of Yijin's small rats appeared, making faint gestures as if trying to show them something important. The entire team stopped, recognizing it immediately as one of Yijin's specially trained rats. They took this as a sign to follow it without any question. Quietly and cautiously, they began to follow the rat as it scurried ahead, guiding them through the eerily silent night in the ruined city. As they walked along the path, someone commented that the station ahead looked like it had been transformed into a shallow lake. John asked if that might be from a giant's rampage. The archer replied that it was very likely. The ground had shifted significantly when the buildings collapsed, which could have easily created sunken areas filled with water. While they continued walking near the edge of the water, something began to stir beneath the surface of the lake. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something massive began to rise, emerging completely from the water in front of them. Both John and Deoksu immediately sensed that something was wrong. They noticed strange movements in the ripples, something that didn't align with the natural motion of water. The others asked them what was going on, and Jean replied that he had just heard something that didn't sound like it belonged there. He squinted and looked carefully ahead, trying to make out details in the dim lighting. Suddenly, he pointed towards a distant figure and said that there was someone up ahead. The silhouette looked human at first glance, and they wondered if it might be a woman. But as their eyes adjusted and they looked more intently, they noticed something strange, something moving behind her. It was a tail. The creature stared directly at them with a strange intensity, and then it opened its mouth wide and let out a deafening, high-pitched scream that tore through the still night air. In an immediate panic, the healer shouted a warning to everyone, telling them to cover their ears as fast as they could. The creature, despite looking like a woman, was no ordinary monster. What stood before them, shrieking, in a voice that seemed capable of ripping through their very minds, was, in reality, a siren. In a sudden, desperate reaction, everyone in the group instinctively raised their hands to tightly cover their ears, trying to block out the piercing, bone-rattling scream of the siren. Deoksu quickly began to show visible signs of exhaustion, struggling to keep his hands pressed firmly against his head, his arms shaking under the immense strain. Meanwhile, Yanju looked around in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening, her voice filled with disbelief as she questioned the situation. Deoksu, even more bewildered, realized with mounting horror, his limbs betraying him as if something else were controlling them. Moments later, as if pulled by an invisible current, both he and Yanju began to slide, helplessly towards the edge of the lake. The pull was strong and completely relentless, and they were dragged across the ground without being able to stop. When Yanju hit the ground and felt the cold water, she immediately understood the danger. Watching Dyaxum move toward the water so fast, she felt that if he kept going, he would be in serious trouble. Suddenly, at that very moment, sharp fangs erupted from the water and lunged toward her feet, forcing her instincts into overdrive. Reacting instantly, she tried to swim upward to the surface, but the monstrous creatures seized her legs with vicious strength, pulling her back down into the water with raw, angry force. Meanwhile, back above the surface, Dungeon and the others were still in a battle of attrition, struggling to withstand the siren's terrible scream. Their faces contorted with pain, their bodies weak. They tried to hold out just a little longer. Amid the chaos and panic, the healer closed her eyes and focused, gathering all her remaining strength. With a surge of energy, she cast a protective magical armor over the group, enveloping them in a glowing defensive shield. Now protected by the magical barrier, Dongan felt a palpable difference. He said that he felt much stronger, more able to resist the siren's debilitating scream. The man with glasses then asked, almost out of breath, what exactly the young healer's power was. Exhausted and barely able to stand, she pleaded with them to hurry and save Diaksu and Yangju before it was too late. But just as she finished speaking, something in the water caught her eye. A dreadful blue creature, barely visible beneath the surface, began to emerge from the depths of the lake. From a distance, the rest of the group watched the movement and began to question, were those bastards? Before anyone could answer, the creatures launched a sudden, brutal attack, moving with terrifying speed and aggression. Sensing the coming fight, Dongjun immediately called out to everyone, telling them to get ready. He warned them that the creatures were closing in fast. Without a moment's hesitation, the monsters leaped through the air, heading straight for the group. Dongjin quickly raised a steel rod with both hands, bracing himself for the impact, ready to retaliate with powerful force. His weapon met the creature's strike, sending shockwaves through the air. Just as the creature began to recover, it was struck by a well-aimed arrow, finally falling down. However, only one of the monsters was defeated, while several others continued to emerge from the shadows. The female archer, clearly frustrated, mumbled under her breath about the endless wave of creatures. Without delay, the monsters reached the surface, surrounding the group from all sides with terrifying speed. In growing distress, Dong Yun insisted that they couldn't waste time. They had to rescue Diaksu and Yangju now. Meanwhile, from the other side of the lake, something began to get the creature's attention. It was the Wer-Bear woman returning from the depths, carrying Diasu in her strong arms. As she came up, Diasu gasped and coughed, expelling the water from his lungs. He mumbled that he honestly thought he was going to die. Overcome with relief, the group's faces lit up with joy at the sight of their safe return. Diasu then turned to Yanju and with deep sincerity thanked her for saving him. But their moment of reunion was abruptly interrupted. The bastards began their relentless assault again, not giving the group a second to breathe. The team quickly realized the creatures weren't going to let up, not even for a moment. The EXU immediately activated his magical armor, his body lighting up with protective energy. As the monsters kept charging forward, he yelled to the group that they would hold the line and fight until the very end. In that moment, the Wer-Bear woman planted her feet firmly and got ready to strike. As one of the creatures lunged forward, she threw a heavy punch that landed squarely on its face, sending it flying backward through the air. The creature violently crashed into a thick wooden pillar, splintering it with the force of the impact. On top of that very pillar, a goblin's body had been tied and hung. At that instant, both Dongjin and Diaksu looked up and shouted for everyone to move away quickly. Without hesitation, the group jumped back just in time, as the place they had been standing was hit. Yunho immediately turned and asked Dongjun if he was okay. Dongjun replied that he was fine and asked what had just happened. As he saw the wreckage more clearly, Diaksu froze, unable to speak, still chained to the fractured pillar that crashed from on high. As the party gazed upon the grim spectacle, the spectacle man ordered them all to look upward. When they obeyed, terror gripped them at the sight they beheld. Countless goblins, their bodies bound and suspended far above, formed into the grotesque shape of a colossal cross. Dongjin realized the team had been fixated on the dangers below, completely oblivious to the nightmare hanging over them. And in that instant, he reached a horrifying conclusion. These fiends don't distinguish between their victims, be they monster or human. Just then, the female archer's bow slipped from her grasp and hit the stone floor. Her entire frame started to convulse uncontrollably. She was rendered utterly speechless by the scene, unable to comprehend the horror that was displayed before her. In absolute silence, she asked herself, could that broken man be my father? Without warning, one of the abominations shot forward at blinding speed. Dongan watched in absolute dread. as the beast charged straight for the paralyzed archer, who remained frozen, completely oblivious to the imminent threat. Without a second thought, he desperately roared her name. At that precise instant, a thunderous gunshot shattered the air. The bullet found its mark in the creature midly, slamming it down and sending it sprawling across the ground. Wielding the firearm was Byung-ho, who instantly spun to check if the archer was unharmed. Dong-jin commended his lightning-fast reaction in a dire moment, but he quickly sensed that something was gravely amiss. The archer was now slumped on her knees, visibly traumatized, her gaze vacant and shattered. Suddenly, the spectacled man emerged, urgently shouting out to Dang-yun. He proclaimed he might have devised a strategy to conquer their current predicament. He relayed that through Blackie, he managed to survey the entire area from a high vantage. And through this, he discovered something vital. The agonizing wail that had been plaguing their minds was also the force that was commanding the monsters. Dong-jun was staggered by this revelation. The spectacled man continued, stating he couldn't fully decipher the siren's cry, but he observed that each time she unleashed her voice, the fish-faced horrors reacted and began to mobilize. He then theorized that if they could somehow sever the sound, it was highly probable the creatures would lose their cohesion and retreat, for they would be left without a commander. In the face of this intense and increasingly desperate situation, Dong-jian conceded that the gambit was worth the risk. However, he feared that the creatures would grant them no opening to execute the plan. Seeking clarity, Deok-su asked him bluntly if the strategy was truly just about silencing the whale. Dong-jian affirmed it with grim certainty in his tone. Then, with unyielding resolve in his gaze, Deok-su declared he would be the one to strike that creature down, and that he had a method. Meanwhile, on the far side of the chamber, the siren parted her maw once again, unleashing her soul-crushing cry. And like perfectly trained soldiers, the monsters answered the call, as if preparing for yet another calculated assault. Observing their movements with keen eyes, Dang-yun saw that the monsters were altering their positions. The spectacled man surmised they must have discerned the party's new objective was to eliminate the siren. Dang-yun then looked towards Deok-su and questioned if he could truly place his faith in him. Deok-su answered with absolute confidence, telling everyone to put their trust in him. He made it known that their only task was to forge a path for him. He would handle the final blow all by himself. Without a moment's pause, the healer vowed she would remain behind to guard the party. And with the strategy now set in stone, the party surged forward with unwavering conviction. Every warrior in the squad was focused solely on creating that one crucial opening for Deok-su, assaulting the enemy with zero hesitation, and felling one monster after another with a relentless onslaught. Dong-jin stopped for a fleeting second, glanced back at Deok-su, and yelled for him to advance. For now was his opening. Deok-su zeroed in on his objective, planted his stance, and held his halberd with expertise and might. Then, with his entire being, he hurled the weapon down the passage, aiming directly at the siren. The weapon tore through the air with astonishing velocity, but the siren moved with deftness, evading with ease as the halberd missed its mark, and continued onward, clanging past her. The party was frozen in stunned silence, watching as the chance they had fought so viciously for slipped away in a single heartbeat. Yet Deok-su remained completely unbothered. The siren erupted in a manic cackle, joined by her grotesque horde, mocking him for his apparent failure. But Deok-su merely smirked, composed and tranquil, with a knowing glint in his eye. He questioned Dong-jin if he had truly forgotten something. Bewildered and angered, Dong-jin had no idea what he was talking about, until a sudden, dawning realization made his eyes go wide, with a hint of cunning. Deok-su then questioned what the best method is to catch a fish. As he finished, he raised a hand and triggered the recall function on his halberd. The weapon obeyed, and on its return flight, it carved a clean path through the siren's spine, impaling her and silencing her wicked laughter forever. In that instant, the system proclaimed that a level 33 siren had been vanquished. Experience points had been acquired. The halberd returned to Deok-su's waiting hand, as all eyes turned to stare at the siren's now still form. The fish-faced monsters fell into disarray, clearly adrift without their commander's voice, and swiftly retreated back into the blackness of the lake. This sudden vanishing act brought a wave of reprieve to the party, as they now faced one less menace in the dark. Without losing a single moment, Dong-jun approached the archer and gently asked her condition. She was still shivering, incapable of calming her nerves. Worried, the healer turned to Dong-jian, inquiring what their next move should be. Dong Jian considered seeking out Jaehyun, but then the archer suddenly confessed with a shattered voice that one of the corpses hanging on the crosses above was her father. Dong Jian was struck dumb. He whipped around, refusing to believe that his father-in-law could be among those brutalized and broken figures. Engulfed by a profound, unbearable despair, the archer descended into uncontrollable sobbing, mourning her fallen father. Beside her, Dang Yun collapsed to his knees, overtaken by utter panic and disbelief. The entire party surrounding them felt the crushing weight of her agony, as if it was their very own. And right there before them, suspended from a cross in a horrific state, was her father's corpse, a soul-shattering vision that wounded the spirit of everyone who saw it. At that exact moment, the system displayed a mission reconstruction window. This instance, with the archer as the primary subject, the prize, to resurrect her father back to life. However, the system issued a clear warning. Resurrection was only achievable within the confines of the absolute domain. Gazing at the panel with a mixture of urgency and desperation, Jaehyun frantically tapped on the system interface, attempting to complete the reconstruction sequence. Jaehyun, seeing him in such a frantic state of turmoil, was absolutely dumbfounding to watch. But then, all at once, Jaehyun paused. He began to reflect more rationally on the crisis and the fate the group had vested in him. He understood that if matters had escalated to a point where lives were truly threatened, he would have been summoned without a moment's delay. With this thought, he tried to assure himself that this meant there was no actual peril, no alternative path, no move to be made. But even as he attempted to pacify his own thoughts, a persistent uncertainty continued to gnaw at him. Was it truly a fact that there was no other way? Being dragged into the abyss, encircled by a legion of armed fishmen, hardly felt like a situation that could be dismissed. It was undeniably a grave and present danger. Jaehyun could not help but feel anguish for his own family, filled with an intense longing to see them again immediately. Yet he was also aware that this desperate hope was not his alone. The others possessed their own loved ones and personal battles too. Even so, he attempted to banish that notion, persuading himself that protecting his own kin must be the priority, above all things and all other people. With trembling hands, he finally made his selection, and from the system, a new quest was issued to the party. The objective was to construct a grave with a 1-hour time constraint. The compensation was a meager amount of experience, and the quest carried no penalty for failure. When the archer saw the notification, she became even more distraught. A wave of utter despair and profound sorrow overwhelmed her body, crushing her spirit entirely. Meanwhile, from a hidden vantage, Jaehyun observed in silence, consumed by his own regret, witnessing the entire gut-wrenching scene through his supreme eye ability. In time, the grave was finished. The entire party now gathered before it. Somber and mournful, Dong Jian approached the archer and softly inquired if she was truly all right with this resolution. She answered with resolve that her father would have wanted it so. She revealed that he was devoted to his occupation, always speaking of his desire to be laid to rest near the railroad tracks. When time came, then, clutching a steel plate bearing his name, she recalled how as a young girl she found that desire absurd. But now, she had granted his wish. He was now at peace, precisely where he always proclaimed he wanted to be, and the metal plate bearing his name would mark his final rest. From his distant watch, Jaehyun was struck by a sudden, ominous thought. Perhaps someday, this very same agony might become his own fate. He could only pray that their sorrow would never become his reality. It was precisely because of this terror that he forged a resolve to defend them, at any and all cost. Glancing back at the system window, he understood something. To achieve this, he was going to require more powerful allies by his side. And so, in that fateful moment, he steeled his resolve. The individual who mattered most now was the scene shifted before the notion was complete. In a different location, a goblin was struck down by a man wielding water. In that second, the system flashed a notification. Loyalty of citizen Jun Hyuk had surpassed 30. He now met the requirements to be enlisted as a vassal. Instantly following this, another notice confirmed his successful registration. A woman materialized behind him, calling his name and alerting him that his body was glowing. He quickly glanced down at his hands and was astonished by the sight. He became utterly captivated, pondering what this phenomenon could possibly mean. At that instant, the system declared he had ascended to level 40 and obtained the titles of 12th Bell, Knight and Mage. He now held 59 trust and 51 loyalty points, and his awakened powers were tied to the manipulation of water. Soon after this, a new quest materialized. The potency of his mage abilities had been amplified by 100%. One of his new powers, Water Bomb. A rank let him conjure high-temperature, pressurized water that detonated with a power relative to the mana he invested. The other power, Water Control, S rank, granted him the power to command water freely using mental force. The system then declared the objective: utilize these powers within 10 minutes. The reward was a boost in his mental fortitude. The penalty for failure would be total mental collapse. Standing there, Junhyuk was awestruck by what had unfolded before him. The quest notification flashed once more. As he processed it, an ally nearby asked if he was alright, but he simply responded by asking for some time. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face as he began to grasp the nature of his quest. He quickly understood. There was a more than sufficient number of foes nearby to test his power on. Without pause, liquid began to materialize around him, initiating the trial. A colossal sphere of water coalesced before everyone, leaving the goblin horde utterly stunned and defenseless. Then, with unwavering conviction, Junhyuk uttered the command, Water Bomb. He launched it forward, impacting the horde of goblins without a shred of mercy. The ensuing detonation carved a massive crater in the earth, leaving not a single one of them alive. As Junhyuk observed in quiet awe, he extended his hand once more, invoking the water control power. With intense concentration, he started to levitate the droplets of water upward. What transpired next astounded two men, who had been silently observing the entire event. A man cloaked in black inquired with utter disbelief if it was truly Junhyuk responsible for all of this. The other man confirmed it, stating that what they were witnessing was indeed Junhyuk's newfound might. With a serene smile on his face, Junhyuk let the tiny droplets descend slowly like a soft rainfall, still held within his absolute command. Immediately after, he dropped to his knees on the earth, raised his arms to the sky, and began to offer praise for the blessing he had just been granted. The two men, now even more perplexed, started to question aloud whether he might have lost his sanity. At that precise instant, the system displayed a notification declaring that both his trust and loyalty had risen, that the quest had been triumphantly cleared, and that 70,251 mana had been consumed. Witnessing all of this, Jaehyun was utterly dumbfounded. He truly never anticipated an S-rank power to awaken in such a fashion. With this turn of events, Junhyuk had become the second individual to possess an S-rank skill after Yeonju. Jaehyun began to ponder, considering how astonishing it all was, especially given Junhyuk's initial ability was a mere B rank, a power that used mental force to generate water. He hadn't foreseen it would evolve so profoundly. Now, he questioned if this monumental growth was a result of Junhyuk's high level. Standing before the system panel, he conceded to himself that this result was unforeseen, but he was pleased with the outcome he had obtained. Internally, he recalled that when the power was still B-rank, he would use mental force to generate water in any shape. Now, he considered how this new application fit into his grand strategy, the metaphorical chessboard of his pieces. He observed that within Dongyun's party, there was no requirement to insert a new piece, as the squad was already impeccably balanced. As he contemplated what his subsequent move ought to be, Jaehyun continued to gaze at the screen. The screen now displayed a notification about a goblin hunt. Level 6 goblins were being systematically eradicated, and both experience points and funds were being deposited to his account. Seeing this message left Jaehyun in disbelief. It was deep into the night, yet people were still out there fighting. Suddenly, the system flashed another alert. The skill level had been elevated. His declaration of return to home had now achieved level 20. With this, 3 additional skill points had been awarded, along with a completely unforeseen ability. Jaehyun was thrown into a state of shock as he absorbed the latest update. The system also declared that his territory was now expanding, and with that expansion came a searing, excruciating pain that coursed through his entire being. He let out a scream, consumed by the agony, while Yi-Jin watched in horror, completely frozen and unsure how to react. The agony became unbearable, but despite it all, the territory continued to grow further and further without end. With his vision failing, Jaehyun could just barely make out Yi-Jin as she urgently pleaded, asking if he was alright. Jaehyun was consumed by torment, far beyond anything he had ever known before. It felt as if colossal spikes were shredding through his flesh, tearing him asunder from the inside out. Yi-Jin persisted, her voice laced with sheer panic, instructing him to breathe desperately. She asked what she could possibly do to aid him in this dire hour, visibly panicked and desperate to alleviate his agony. Jae-hyun wrenched his eyes open, his consciousness hazy and disoriented. Through his blurred gaze, he caught a flash of her face, partially obscured by the fog of confusion and the unceasing pain. Startled, he saw she was getting perilously close to his face, closing in on him with a very clear purpose. With a strained gasp, he demanded to know precisely what she thought she was doing. Embarrassed and startled, Yijin instantly recoiled in a panic. Apologizing profusely, she hastily explained that for a second she feared he had ceased to breathe and was preparing to administer CPR to him. But before she could elaborate further, Jae-hyun cut her off, sternly insisting that he was all right. Behind him, Blackie was whimpering, clearly distressed and deeply concerned. Jae-hyun reached over, gently stroking Blackie to soothe him, softly murmuring that everything was going to be just fine. Still regaining his own composure, Jae-hyun invoked his ability, the Supreme Eyes, through the prism of his awakened sight. He witnessed the expansion as it occurred, and was immediately staggered by its sheer scale. The domain had spread out to the west and to the north, enveloping the streets within a complete 1 kilometer radius from the complex. Lying there on the floor, he finally grasped the true source of the overwhelming agony he had just been forced to endure. The territory had reached its most massive extent yet. Shifting his focus back to the system screen, Jae-hyun knew that no matter how ravaged and depleted he felt, now was certainly not the moment for repose. The system flashed a message, stating he had acquired 3 skill points for reaching level 20. Jae-hyun had already determined which power he would empower next. He opted to enhance the power he deemed the most critical for the mission that lay before him. Supreme Recluse's Eyes. Immediately upon his selection, the system informed him that Supreme Eyes had ascended to level 4. Moments later, a new notice appeared on the panel, announcing that a multi-vision function had been unlocked and integrated into the power. With this new capability, Jae-hyun felt his perceptual range expand exponentially, as if he were now encircled by innumerable CCTV screens, each displaying a unique perspective. However, he quickly discerned that maintaining this enhanced vision act placed a considerable burden on his mental energy. He concluded that managing 3 simultaneous viewpoints was the extent of his current ability. Once more, Jae-hyun consulted the system and noted he had 2 skill points remaining. He resolved to allocate them to bolstering the skill, known as Preservation of Dignity. Mere moments later, the system showed a new update, stating that the skill had now achieved level 5, and that a new feature called Mystic Draw had been unlocked. Additionally, he was granted a reward of 300 crystals, which took him entirely by surprise. Shortly after, the system clarified that it was via this Mystic Draw feature that he had acquired those 300 crystals. Jae-hyun saw no logic in refusing the unforeseen boon, so he clicked the notification to claim them. The instant he did, a radiant circle manifested on the floor beneath him. The circle emitted a light of such intensity that it was blinding to Yijin, Blackie, and even to Jae-hyun himself, compelling them all to avert their eyes. After a few heartbeats, the circle of light vanished, yet a focused, potent luminescence hovered in the air. From within this brilliant radiance, an item began to take shape. It was a ring. The system quickly identified it as a communication ring, crafted specifically to transmit Jae-hyun's voice directly to his vassals. Jae-hyun slipped the artifact onto his finger, still uncertain of its practical application. As he considered its purpose, it dawned on him that its power to project his voice could be the perfect tool for Dabin. But then he recalled that Dabin had already been formally registered as one of his vassals. He accessed the Vassal Management tab within the system, which displayed a detailed profile for Dabin. Level 25, bearing the title of 11th Circle, Trust at 77, Loyalty at 100, and a newly awakened skill, Telepathy. Awestruck by Dabin's newfound power, Jae-hyun admitted to himself that telepathy was, without a doubt, the ideal skill for someone with her crucial communication-based duties. Suddenly, through the multi-vision function of his Supreme Eyes, Jae-hyun witnessed an unsettling scene. 50 individuals were packed together, sharing a single small unit for shelter. Inside that cramped space, Dabin tried to convey to the hostile crowd that their situation was merely a temporary one. However, her words were met with fury and scorn, as if she were dismissing them as mere cattle. One man, visibly enraged, raised his voice in a shout, reminding her they had all witnessed countless vacant homes along their journey. He demanded to know what nonsense she was spewing, as if her reasoning was completely beyond all logic. Clenching their hands in raw frustration, several more people surged forward, demanding that, at the very least, the children must be allowed to rest in comfort. They insisted that some of the empty rooms be unsealed, so everyone could get proper rest. After enduring so much hardship, overwhelmed by the escalating crisis that was spiraling out of her hands, Dabin hastily offered an apology, fighting to maintain her calm, as she tried to explain that the existing protocols did not permit such arrangements. All the while, from his hidden vantage, Jae-hyun observed every detail unfold in silence through his supreme eyes. In that moment, the system displayed a new notification. A skill named Supreme Recluse's Door had been activated. With this power, Jae-hyun could now interface with and manipulate all doors within the territory he had claimed as his domain. Back inside the chaotic unit, just as Dabin was struggling desperately to bring the situation under control, a nearby door suddenly swung wide open on its own. Irritated and wary, one of the men immediately questioned the audacity of someone invading another person's home. During a crisis, he reminded everyone that in moments like this, people are supposed to support one another, not create needless friction and arguments. He demanded to be told why so much pointless opposition was being raised against such a fundamental request. At that precise instant, Jae-hyun strode through the open doorway, catching Dabin completely off guard. He turned to the agitator, his gaze resolute, and declared with cold finality that if the man took issue with the house rules, then he was more than welcome to vacate his house at once. The man, floored by Jae-hyun's audacity, demanded that he repeat what he had just uttered. But Jae-hyun, without a shred of hesitation, simply proceeded to eject him from the premises on the spot. Witnessing this sudden and decisive act, the remainder of the crowd began to whisper amongst themselves, remarking how the situation had abruptly de-escalated. Jae-hyun then pivoted to address them all and posed a sharp inquiry, asking if anyone else possessed grievances they wished to air. With an icy and unyielding tone, he proclaimed that from this moment forward, the power, water, and gas supply to this entire unit would be severed. Hearing this, a young woman, visibly panicked, asked if he was truly serious about such a drastic measure. Jae-hyun met her gaze and retorted coolly that, in truth, that was the very question he wished to ask them. With a hard look, he stated it was no mere accident. They emerged right after the giant's defeat. He then asked if they arrived because they deemed this place capable, just like the countless others who appeared every single day, with the exact same entitlement and expectations. His words struck the group like a harsh dose of reality, rendering them momentarily silent. But Jae-hyun was far from finished. He pressed on, explaining that capitulating to such demands would spawn three critical issues. First, all available rooms would eventually be depleted, making it impossible to shelter new arrivals who desperately required a safe haven. Second, the current inhabitants who had been there, those who were already established and abiding by the rules, would begin to feel deeply slighted. And third, once they yielded to a single demand, the cascade of requests would become endless. With absolute, cutting resolve, Jae-hyun raised his voice and proclaimed that the fundamental rights and comforts they sought to claim here simply were not guaranteed. He declared that the South Korean nation had already collapsed and that he, standing before them, was not a champion for anyone's ideologies or fantasies. He acknowledged that some may view him as a despot wielding his authority, but he warned them that the world had become far too savage, far too merciless for naive concepts like rights and welfare to exist without being fought for and earned. He proclaimed that if they wished to possess such luxuries, they had to first demonstrate that they were deserving of them. He continued, explaining that the other survivors, the ones who had come before them, were tolerating incredibly difficult circumstances, instituting rotating shifts just to obtain some rest. And despite all the misery and sacrifice, these people were still ensuring they looked after the children and the most vulnerable among them, choosing to struggle for life as a unified whole. Finally, Jae-hyun issued a stern and non-negotiable command. They were to retreat immediately to the lodgings that had been designated for them. He warned them that if they chose to disobey, they would be positioning themselves to forfeit even more than what they had already lost. Upon hearing those words, the crowd instantly recoiled. Dabin, feeling a sense of immense relief, allowed a quiet sigh and offered her thanks to Jae-hyun for his aid in the crisis. However, he countered that there was no reason for gratitude. In fact, he stated that he was the one who owed her his thanks. His perplexing statement left Dabin momentarily speechless, attempting to decipher what he could possibly mean by that. It was then that Jae-hyun suggested that perhaps she too might be capable of a feat similar to what he had just performed. He asked if she had heard of telepathy, and then instructed her to envision a person she wished to contact, picturing herself speaking to them in her mind, as if holding a silent dialogue within her thoughts.